let's and start. I like to do this, just your name, your time on the board, where'd you go to high school, and why are you on the board? Let's start with Jessica.
All right. I'm Jessica Larson. I have been on the board almost 2 years. I think in August it will be 2 years. Where did I go to school? I went to Wilton High School in Connecticut. But a really good. So I realized I had like different bars because of that. But I'm super lucky for it. And why am I on the board? I originally got on the board because I was concerned about music and arts education and funding them. And I feel like it's just kind of the right thing to do. Yeah. There you go.
All right, I'll take it. Where's my name tag? Oh, I'm Alex Goldner. Yep. I've been on the board for 3 months now, 2 or 3 months. And I went to high school at CHS, so I'm a local of Corvallis. I went to Garfield School, what's now Linus Pauling, but it was Highland View. Then I went to CHS. My wife went to TV, so yeah, I'm a local to the system. And I'm on the board mostly because I was really interested in getting more involved with the school, and I work full-time during the day. It's really hard for me to get involved with the school during school hours. Though my lovely wife is here frequently. We have 2 kids at the school. And I thought this could be a cool way to learn more about how we get this amazing project off the ground. And already I've learned how much work this is and have so much more respect for the process. It's easy to be strongly opinionated about things with the school. And then when you're more involved, you kind of learn like, wow, there's a lot of pieces to it. So still trying to figure out how I can be of more support and kind of still learning the ropes and whatnot, but that's a little bit about me.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I went to high school, El Camino High School in South San Francisco. Why am I on the board? I have been on the board since 2019. I'm on the board because I am very passionate and advocating for those of our children who are differently abled and want to make sure that we support DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and also justice. Now we have a Jedi in here. And then my background is I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I work at a nonprofit here in town, and I kind of want to bring my work into the board and the conference. Very passionate.
We have several people here in medicine, don't we? In medical field.
Yeah, I'm a
Right.
PA.
Yeah. Right. And you're a doctor. Yeah, I remember that. Wow.
I'm Karen. I think this is my 11th year on the board. And I went to McKenzie High School up on the McKenzie River out of Eugene. And Danny Hayes, who was way back when the school started, called me one night because I worked as a teacher and he's a teacher and then an administrator. He goes, Karen, why don't you join the board? As an educator, and I always work with budgets at school, so I'm here. Just lives right down the road.
Fun fact I just learned about Karen is that she enjoys teaching boys how to drive.
My second grandson is just turned 15, so I go pick him up and we go for a ride. We go to lunch and then we geocache. And then he drives me down.
Any tips? My kids aren't there. Any tips for the
Just
teaching?
drop him at Karen's house.
That's what I was thinking. One more
In
year.
5 years, we'll be there.
He's done
Sandra's
really.
already caught. He's like,
I mean, I took him out the very first week, and it was amazing how, going around those curves when you're going into town, instead of slamming your brakes on like so many people, you just slow down. So no, his brother is 19, and so Noah's always in the back seat. Hunter, you're going too fast. You didn't stop long enough. So I need to get Hunter in the back seat. With Noah driving.
Payback.
Yeah.
my name is Patrick Riccolo. I went to school in Dwight Township High School in Illinois, much flatter. And this is my second year on the board. a little over 2 full years now. And I joined because I got strong-armed into it. But
Oh, now.
it says one of the strong armors.
secretary.
But I really enjoy it for the fact that we have a phenomenally special community, and I just want to go ahead and contribute to help foster that.
I'm Jackie Crumry. I think 3 years on the board, maybe. I'm not sure. I went to school in Newton, Iowa, back when the Iowa schools were some of the best in the nation. Sadly, they are not anymore. But if anybody is old enough that they took the Iowa test of basic skills,
Oh, yeah.
and the ACT was written in Iowa. And yeah, if I could be on a school board there to try to help them, I would. But I'm just here because an email went out, and I'm like, oh, sure, I'll do that. Here I am.
I'm obviously not on the board, but I went to a little high school.
But how long have you been here? Why are you here?
Oh, why am I here? Well, I'm here because I want to help kids and families. But and I've been here. This is my second full year, going into third. Hi, Lester.
Sorry, I'm late. I sheep rodeo this morning went into overtime, but I caught the sheep, so.
Where's another you?
It was about a 250-pound ewe, and I had to kind of. Still got the moves. It sounds like. I've been on the board for almost 6 years now, I think. Yeah, which is now to hear Karen say. She was the old timer when it was 5 years. So anyway, so I joined because I came to a meeting years ago, right before COVID, and then COVID hit. So here I am still. So we got through a lot, and I think the school's got just like a ton of potential for what it wants to be doing here, project and place-based. I think that there's something we can do here that they can't do elsewhere. I think that's. Also run a jewelry company and coach track at Kowalski.
You're fairly busy. As all are. Well, I'm Kristen Miles. I am actually on a school board as well. I'm on the Tigard-Tualatin School Board. This is my second year there. And you think you know everything. I mean, I've been doing this for 9 years at OSBA, and then I got on my board and I was like, oh. I went to high school at McKay High School in Salem, Oregon. And I do this job because I worked at Portland Public Schools for 10 years before I came to OSBA and really decided that I wanted to try to help make an impact statewide. And I also, so I think you all know this, that I was the director of the charter schools program at Portland Public Schools before I came here. And so I have like 17 years with charter schools. And it's really exciting for me to continue working with charter schools in the way that I do. And so everything with the word charter in it that comes to OSBA, that's not a legal question, comes to me. So happy to be here, happy to work with you all for so many years. So thanks for having me. Welcome. Okay, so today we're going to go over roles and responsibilities a little bit. I was asked to go over board officer roles and responsibilities, so I pulled those right from your bylaws, and we can talk about that. There we go. We are going to go through some scenarios. We may have done these last year. I'm not sure. I know that we had something a little bit different that we did last year, but you can all tell me if
We did the personality test.
That's right. We did that, and we did some conflict stuff and all of that. I like to go over other things for charter schools to think about that are different than a district board would have to think about. And then we'll talk about some tools for collaboration, including board operating agreements. And I also know, I remember last time you set a couple of goals. I remember bringing like some draft goals that you all set for yourselves. And I wanted to check in and see if those had been worked on, what you did with those, how far you got. I'm seeing
Note the lack
faces
of eye
around the
contact.
room. I know, I'm seeing everybody go.
Any chance you brought a list of what those goals were?
I do. I have them in a different PowerPoint right here.
Remember.
We can look at those again if you're
All right.
interested at the end.
Probably nailed it.
We met them all.
We worked hard. We
I
worked
bet-
hard.
I
doing
know
that.
you
Hard, we
did.
met them and they've just been swept away.
Phenomenal.
Like immediately
Yeah.
after the meeting.
Did the second half of that. Question.
Uh,
Possibly.
okay. I don't know if everybody has something to write on. Even if you don't, you can just look at these. But I like to have the board talk about each individual person, look at that list and look at what you think your top 3 values are in relation to your role on the board and in relation to the school. And we'll share those out in just a minute. Again, if you don't have something to write on, that's okay. Or write your own or think of your own if what you see up here is not reflective of your values. I'll give you just a second. Anybody need a little more time? Okay. Okay. Who would like to share?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Before I forget what ones I picked. Responsibility, because I get asked all the time, why are you still on the board when your kid isn't there anymore? And I have a feeling of responsibility to not just immediately ditch. I think there needs to be a little bit of, so we would put it in medicine, continuity of care. Honesty, because that's how I roll in general, and I'll say the honest things that maybe others are thinking but don't say out loud. Sometimes that gets me in trouble. And there was something from the first row.
Probably in the back.
Nope, that wasn't it. Though I appreciate you selecting that one. I think that is a compliment.
That's the personal value.
Maybe I can't remember if I chose cooperation, but and it's a little less now, we have a little less conflict amongst the members, but I feel like I've been a little bit of the person who bridged the camps.
Did anybody pick any of those? Responsibility, honesty, cooperation. Patrick, which one did you pick?
Honesty.
Okay.
So it's a very important one that we be honest with the community, with each other, with ourselves. My other 2, I chose ethics, just for the simple fact that we need to act ethically. Kind of goes hand in hand with honesty, in my opinion. And then the other one I chose was stewardship, because that is, I feel like being in a leadership role in the school, we are stewards for it as it currently is for future generations.
Honesty, ethics, stewardship. Did anybody pick any of those? Okay. Who would like to go next? Yeah.
Accountability, Fits well with the treasure, I think.
Literally.
Integrity, which is very similar to the honesty, and vision.
Accountability, integrity, vision. Anybody pick any of those?
I had integrity down.
Okay.
I'll start. My three for some reason in my mind start from the beginning and kind of move through into one concept. So actually added a word. I added empathy to the list, just because that's something that drives me in my personal relationships and professional ones as well. I value intellect and I love intelligence, but I think empathy is almost more important in today's world. In order to just survive, we have to be able to visualize and really kind of feel what others are feeling. And if you can do that, you can also come up with more robust solutions. So that kind of goes into integrity, doing that with integrity, using that gift of being able to know how to make things work or know how to influence things. We need to exercise that with integrity, because that's a gift and a power that we can use to influence other people. And then the last word that I used was community. Again, especially in sort of the times that we're living in, the idea that we really are just one community, we really are all in this together. How can we all thrive together? That's going to produce the best outcome for everyone involved. And when you have kids, you see the value of spending time with other kids and learning different experiences and everyone broadening their horizons. So for me, those three things kind of went together.
Empathy, integrity, community. Did anybody pick? Anybody who hasn't gone, pick one of those? Okay. Who would like to go next?
I picked inclusion, kindness, and the future generation. Kind of tying into what you guys talked about. Like, we're here to make an impact for the future generations, and moving into empathy. We need kindness, and we need to include everybody and not just pick and choose. Which goes to, I've had my fourth kid is here, and I have a differently able kid who came through here, and so I think when we make it inclusive for everybody, we make that impactful with the empathy for our future generations. So it's apart from the other schools within our community.
Empathy, future generations, and which was, or no, not empathy, integrity, future generations, and which was the third one?
Oh no, I did inclusion,
Inclusion, kindness.
and
Sorry.
future generation.
Okay, inclusion, kindness, future generations. Did either of you pick any of them?
No.
Okay.
I chose inclusion.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had inclusion, chose 4, connection, inclusion, leadership, and service.
Okay.
So for connection, I think connecting between staff, connecting between myself and board, connecting to community is a huge piece of my role. Inclusion is a personal passion for me too. As a teacher for many years, it's important to me that everyone feels that I was trying to decide between belonging and inclusion, but I just want to make sure that everybody feels welcome and receives the same sort of equitable care in my service. And then leadership, because obviously as leader of the school, and then service. I think anybody who works in schools is not here for the big bucks. Where was that one? The
Financial stability.
the wealth of it all, but or even the fame. But we're here to serve kids, and we're here to serve families, and that's a big piece of what we do.
Connection, inclusion, leadership, service. Either of you have any of them? Okay.
Oh, I have connection.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Look at us, we're connecting.
And I picked connection for many of the reasons Sarah did, like the obvious, like we are as a board a great connection between our ED, staff, students, parents, especially since a lot of us are parents and a lot of us know students. And just fostering that connection with trust is another one. Which I think is really important. You can't learn or you can't do your job if you're not in a trusting environment, or you can, but you're not going to do it well. And things aren't going to go well. Trust is really important. And when I see trust fractured here, it calls out to me as something that we can help fix, hopefully. And then joy, which I think goes along with kids-based education and the kind of Muddy Creek ethos of like enjoying. It's amazing to come in and see the egg drop and just the joy on everybody's faces as they're yelling at Jill to drop eggs. Or I was here last week and I saw the second grade tea party with all the moms. Like Catherine works so hard. I mean, all of the teachers work so hard to bring joy into learning. And it's like, it is so life affirming to see that, because I know that they are here and they are underpaid and they're working so hard and they're continuously bringing joy into learning. So I really like with that and want to use it up.
Connection, trust, and joy. Yes. Do you have any of those?
I don't have any of those. out
Okay,
there.
what you got?
Oh,
No
no.
joy.
I've got coop written down. I think that might be chicken coop or it might be cooperation. I think it was cooperation. Optimism and learning. Although I was a close second on a few other ones over there.
Mhm.
The fourth.
A good deal of overlap between all of you. Any themes that you heard that you want to pick out on the board?
Sounds like we all want to cooperate
Yeah.
and be empathetic with each other.
Strong inclusion themes,
Yeah,
which I
strong
think are
inclusion themes.
important.
Sense of responsibility for what's happening here.
Yeah.
Make it a thriving school for.
Yeah, all of that, which is great. I mean, we don't sit and talk about these kinds of things as boards very often. Like, you know, what do you think? What do you think? Why are you here? What are your values? And then to come up with those as a group can be an important thing to talk about. So thank you for going through that. All right, I'm going to actually skip this one. So we all know, just as you know, a little introduction, that you all come as with your own interests, right? Everybody comes to the board because they want to do something, because they want to help in some way, or they have expertise in some way, which is great to offer to the school. And then together, that's board work, right? You come together as a collective, you come together to make decisions, and board culture then is how you are with each other, right? Whether that is respectful, peaceful, friendly, in conflict, whatever it is, that creates your board culture, which, as research shows us, impacts the whole organization, right? Your board culture impacts the organizational culture. And, you know, I know we talk about this, like, but particularly in charter schools, you are so close to the action, right? You are so close. I mean, like on my board, we are, you know, we're up here. We've got 11,000 students. It's not like we don't know what's going on in schools, but you are all very close to the action. And so the organizational culture that comes from you is a little bit narrower. It's closer. And then organizational culture influences classroom instruction, right? How the organization works is going to impact those that are working with your kids directly. And then that impacts students. So, you know, as we've talked about before, all of you impact students, and then your work together impacts students, and that's what research shows as well. So let me ask you, do you know who your students are and what are their needs? So who comes here and what are their needs? Jimmy?
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Well, I spend most of my time in the third grade classroom
Mhm.
helping out Miss Blanchard, and because I'm an occupational therapist, I've been really working on some finely learned handwriting skills with some of our kids who have some deficits within the classroom, and talking with Miss Blanchard about different sensory input within the classroom and how to make that inclusive for the full classroom and not just singling out different children in the classroom. I do work with some one-on-one with the kids going in, and I'm just noticing their needs are to have input prior to sitting down at the table, and so they can stay at task attention and focus. So what can I do to help to bring that into the classroom? Not only working on some handwriting skills, but also how to get their wiggles out prior to us sitting down. So for me, it's what I do on a daily basis in my job, and I love coming to the classroom and being a part of that.
That's great. Anybody else? Who are your students? What are their needs? Why do students come here?
I think there are students who come here because they do have special needs and they see a small school and think that that will help meet their needs. And I also feel like, unfortunately, being a small school, sometimes we don't really have the resources to meet those needs. And I think it creates conflict and it creates difficulties and a lot of things. What is your percentage of students on IEPs?
35.
35.
That's
very
IC and 504.
And 504.
Yeah. Not that that's
Up
big,
from
but
11% last year.
that was really
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I really do. I think people see this as, oh, it's a small school and my kids got whatever and I'll send them there because they'll be able to have time to,
For reasons unknown, do you feel like the 11, that a 25-point jump is huge? Is that just a vast difference in the student population, or was the 11 just underreported, do you think?
They were under-identified in many cases, but a lot of our incoming students last year were also unidentified and have since come. So yes, and we have, I would say, an atypical percentage of kids with neurodiversity, variety of flavors of that. And we have a high, it's mostly white kids. It's more boys than girls. It's a lot of like high
energy.
I was going to say on the political spectrum, we have a very high liberal community, with some not, but mostly very, very on the liberal side. And so that affects a lot of what we do here too. Coming from a school that was the opposite, it's a difference.
Yes.
And we have a lot of kids who, or families with kids who were not successful in their neighborhood school, and so it chose this as an alternative because they were not having their needs met in their neighborhood school. So that is something we hear a lot. Well, we were at this school and this sucked, and here we are.
Why aren't you better?
Why aren't you better? We also have, I would say, a growing population of kiddos who work in a private school location and see that they can get a similarly high academic experience here for no money. So it's an interesting cross section. That is who our students are. And I think the other thing that we see is that a lot of kiddos come in not having really mastered like how to operate within a community. A lot of lone wolves, a lot of independent thinkers, and which is great. We love that, but we also struggle with helping them become part of a community. But that's our population in a nutshell.
It's changed dramatically over the years because my kids came here as Innaville. We just live up the road. But now, once the district started allowing, Franklin opened up as a choice school. And then when this was opened up as a choice school, especially boys, they know that they're going to be outside a lot. It doesn't matter if they get dirty, and that kind of stuff really attracts. So I don't think students are picking where they're going. I think it's the parents. But that's what they're looking at, is they're not sitting at a desk with 35 other kids. They're going to be moving around. And that, to me, was the big thing once the district opened up other choices.
So the other thing that is true and unique about our population is that there is a high level of privilege because there's a transportation situation where they have to be able to either drive here or drive to the bus stop at weird times of the day. And we don't have an after school program. We don't have a school lunch program. So there's also some sacrifice that comes with being a parent here, or some trade-off. I don't know what you guys would call it, but it means, So I think that just speaks to socioeconomic status sometimes, and it can also just be the prioritization of the parents, a focus on.
So
It's
interesting.
not the neighborhood school anymore.
Right.
Because the population around here is like my husband and I, we had kids, but we haven't moved and no one else has moved. So there's very few kids that actually live around here. Sorry.
When I first came, I thought it was really interesting. I don't know, people were talking about whatever, I don't know, something with the kids that are here. And I can't remember her name. She was the PTA president.
Dana.
And she made a comment, well, things have really changed since we got the buses, because it used to be only people that could drive their kid here. And I was kind of like, oh, you said that out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make the point, we kind of pivoted a little bit to like parents and motivation for being at the school, which is super insightful and interesting, but I was just sort of reflecting on what are the students' needs. And so from like interviewing my own kids, like, you know, we have conversations, how are things going at school? Like, what do you like about Muddy Creek? And I think one of the big things is being a smaller school and the continuity of moving through with your friend group is such a special experience that's really hard to get at other schools.
Because there's not extra classes for them to like be divided up.
Right. And there's something about sticking with this cohort of folks that maybe you didn't get along with one year, and then maybe the next year they seem different, or, you know, they're learning, or this person's a lot different, and, you know, I'm learning these skills or they're learning these skills. There's something really beautiful about that continuity of moving through together and growing together. And of course we get new kids at the school too, but just something reflecting on that need for community that everybody has. I feel like that we were super worried about that for one of ours, for our eldest, and he really thrived on having that, you know, moving through and feeling secure. So just
That's
a really good
extra
observation.
cool by 5th grade. And I recommend you go to outdoor school and you really see how they've come together. And
I can't wait to do that
Yeah.
for our school experience. I want to do that for sure. But, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
So, well, this is just gonna have to be small, but I will read not everything to you, but okay. All right. Okay. So this is just a little bit of the seminal research about what makes a high performing board. And what I did here is just sort of, you know, make a table of what overlaps here and what do these things mean. And so what the research tells us is that a board that has a vision and sets goals, setting clear expectations, and then committing to that vision and building the work off of that vision and those goals, that impacts students. All of these things impact students. Climate and resources. So this is about, you know, what are you able to dedicate to your strategic priorities? What are you able to dedicate to the goals that go with that vision? And then creating the conditions for success. And a lot of that is modeling behavior and resources, right? Like those are conditions, and setting expectations for what does it look like here? All of you have talked about like this needs to be an inclusive place, right? This needs to be a place where students feel like they belong, and you set that expectation. The board helps set that expectation. Yeah, aligning and sustaining resources to meet goals. Again, like I understand, you know, you've got a discretionary funding that's this much, but to the extent possible, how do you align your budget and your resources? And resources is not just money, right? That is time, that is effort, that is, you know, all kinds of things. That is volunteer opportunities to your strategic goals. Data and monitoring. So how do you know your kids are learning, right? And actually, when I say data, I do not just mean state testing data. I don't even just mean academic data. Like this has to do with any kind of information that you have. And that can be financial information, it can be family surveys, it can be however you gather information to know how students are doing and how the school is doing. And then holding the system accountable, which really means like monitoring progress. So if you've got your strategic priorities that everybody's working toward, what are the times of year that you look at those? What kind of data is associated with those? What comes back to you? And building that into your annual calendar. Super important that you set aside time to monitor the big goals of the school.
Can I ask you?
Absolutely.
So does that mean you advocate for us sending surveys to parents and students?
Not us.
Not necessarily advocate
Data, and
for.
I'm just asking.
No,
Right.
it shouldn't be us though. It should be Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Yep. I would say, you know, like that comes to you as information, but it's not the board that administers that. Yep. Cohesive teaming. This is about your relationship, learning together as a board team, doing professional development, that strong shared beliefs and values. That's why we did that exercise early. Like there was a lot of overlap, a lot of themes. And so how do you all together with your executive director make a team? And how do you then, you know, implement those goals that you can have a part in? How do you oversee those? How do you operate as a team? And this is why we work on, like, you know, having respectful relationships and collaborative relationships. Community engagement, always different in a charter school than in a district, because you don't have a catchment area, right? You are a school of choice, as you mentioned. So whether that is marketing, or at this point, whether now it's just word of mouth and you don't have to do any of that anymore. But how do you connect with your community then? How is that transparency? How does that work here? And this is so different between every school. Like community engagement means something different wherever you go. Like, what does that look like here? But having that collaborative relationship, and your staff is part of that too. Your staff is part of your community as well. And then policy and accountability. This is still about like staying on the governance spectrum of things and not getting into the weeds. And I know, again, this is a little bit different in charter schools because, again, you're so close to the system. And before I was on the district board, I was on a charter school board, and it's a world of difference, I know. But as much as possible, really staying that policy, not operations, policy governance piece. Remembering that your only employee who reports to you is your executive director. And so like
That is really hard for us.
Yeah.
I think we struggle with that. I think.
Still, is this an ongoing thing?
I'll take out the think that it's hard for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's,
Which part is
it's not, I think all of that. I think recognizing that Sarah's our only employee,
Mhm.
Not being involved in, I'm going to use curriculum as the example. I think, yeah, I think we struggle with that, being
Mhm.
this over.
Mhm. Mhm.
Since Jackie
And
brought
not-
it up, could you talk about that for this moment?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
got curriculum, which is obviously a foundational.
Yep.
Like it really has a lot to do with board stuff in
Yep.
terms of what we're doing directionally, but like
Mhm. How do you stay out of it?
how do
Yeah.
we be involved appropriately or stay out of it
Right.
appropriately? Yeah.
Right. So, you know, the board takes the most important thing, I think, is that you rely, even if you've got an education background, you know, so do I, and I'm on a board. In fact, 3 out of 5 of our board members are professional educators. But remembering that that's not why we're on the board, not because we have any like insight like your executive director does into the operations of the school, and that like this is a partnership. You hire an executive director to operate the school. Now, might there be some times where you have committees that you're on? Sure, but be really careful about what those are, right? Like I don't, no, you don't have hiring committees, do you? Or do you?
Not anymore.
Okay,
We
good,
do.
right, okay,
We
that
used
would,
to.
that's a huge thing, right? Not being part of hiring anybody who's not your executive director, right? I mean, that could potentially create liability. It is way too much in the weeds. And then looking at, do you have other committees that you all sit on?
We started a budget committee this year,
Okay, that's fair.
And
That's,
then-
that's board work.
and then we have the Jedi committee, but that's an executive director.
Mhm. What is hard about, just so we can like figure out, what is the hard part about not getting into operations or daily stuff? Like, what are the temptations? What do you find yourself wanting to be involved with that maybe needs a pullback? Do you want to say something, Jamie?
Oh, I do. If anybody else wants to go first.
Well, Sarah sent out a survey to teachers,
Mhm.
and one teacher sent us information about the curriculum,
Mhm.
and all I did is say thank you for the information. I mean, it's not our place to say, yeah, we agree it's terrible, or no, we think it's wonderful. So it always feels like you're skating away from any issue when we
Mhm.
can't give a more precise answer
Okay.
as public comment. And
Yeah.
I fall for it 2/3 of the time. We're not supposed to comment.
Right.
But I used to get so frustrated at the district. You'd come with the presentation and they'd just sit there. They weren't paying attention to you.
Mhm.
And no comment,
Mhm.
no after the fact. And I don't know how, I don't understand why you can't comment and help people understand.
Mhm.
Thank you, Karen.
I think
Yes.
it's
So
really
let's talk about that and the slippery slope involved with that in a second.
That
Is
was,
that what you were
that
gonna?
was the hard part of not, is you want to help, but you have these rules and regulations that you have to, yes, or address it.
I mean, you could, I don't know, it's a difficult place to be.
And it doesn't help any of our values of like integrity or trust or empathy, right? Like,
Yeah, I think
like,
you'll lose a lot of
knocks them out.
trust when you sit there and look at each other. And it's not, if you're supporting Sarah, it's kind of letting her down because you can't say that. If you're disagreeing with her and agreeing with the teacher, I don't know, it's could just out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not connected to anybody.
Mhm.
That's what I feel.
Mhm. Okay.
Can I say one thing? I think part of the issue is maybe the way that folks might view the board is different than what the board's actual role is.
Mhm.
So they may think like, oh, well, you can make these things happen.
Oh, whenever they're
Yeah.
angry or upset, that's what I see the pause while I chose appropriate words. They write the board.
Yes.
Right.
And that is so common here.
Yeah.
And as sort of like an empath, when you get that, you want to, or I'll just say I want to respond in a way knowing that I need to sound authentic or I want to be authentic, but at the same time, probably have very little to do with that specific concern. So trying to walk that tightrope of like, where is the right place to advocate and how is the right way to advocate versus like making that human connection. Because a human conversation is a very different thing. It's like a one-on-one, do you agree with me or don't you? And that's not really the way that we should hopefully be engaging, it sounds like. So.
All right, let's talk about all of this for a second, because this is a tricky part. It's an unnatural part, right? Like we all get on a board because like we want to contribute. And I'm sure I've said this to you before, because I say this to every board, nobody knows what a board member does, and neither did you before you got on the board. Right?
I mean, kind of still don't.
Right.
Good, I feel better.
but there is, and I like, again, super common in charter schools, because there's usually a high percentage of folks in charter schools that have students there, right? So you're not only a board member, you're also a peer of a lot of folks, and nobody understands that you cannot act independently, that like you have no authority independently. Now, so I'm going to take a bunch of these one by one. So public comment. I know it's super unnatural to sit there and just be like, we've been talking this whole time. Now folks are going to talk to us and we're just going to stare at you. Do you have any like little script that you read before public comment that explains what it is and what it's for?
Recently added, yeah.
Okay, that the board is, this is our time to listen to you, etc. Okay. The slippery slope with responding in real time to public comment is when you respond as an individual, you are likely representing yourself, not the whole board. So there's that piece, and that could actually, I mean, that could actually go again, like Sarah might have something to say about that, but if a board member is saying something different, then that puts a huge pressure on the system, because then folks are walking away with what you believe, but maybe not what's actually going on. The other piece is there's kind of an inequity in the system if you're talking to one person, but you didn't just talk to the last person, or you spent a bunch of time like in conversation with somebody who comes up to testify or speak to you, but like not the next person. And then there can be a feeling of like, I didn't get the board's attention. Like, you just listened to me, right? And so and then there's also the risk that like you lose control of your meeting, right? It is your meeting. And I mean, this is kind of harsh in black and white, but the public actually has no legal right to participate in your meeting. They have a legal right to observe it and to be there and watch your decision making. You grant them the right to come and testify and speak to you by policy and by practice, which is great community building. I'm never advocating for that not happening, but I think it's just good to know that you're not violating anybody's rights or legal rights if you're not engaging with them. I think that there's probably always an opportunity to continue to educate your community, your staff about what the board does, right? I don't know if you've got like a little like newsletter or piece in a newsletter that goes out about the board, what the work is, or something like that. Sometimes I find, I'm doing this for a charter school coming up, where like they're like, we have hit a boiling point where nobody knows what we do, and they're trying to pick us off individually. So like I'm going there and giving a charter school 101, because it can't come from them. Like they've just learned that like it doesn't matter if it comes from us. Like we need somebody else to stand up and be like, here's what the school does and here's what they don't, here's what the board does and doesn't do. But I think also, and I don't know if you experience this, that do some of you get emails where others of you don't? Yes. That is a risk too. Now, there is a way to respond to that, right? You can always say, and I'm never gonna like say, don't talk to somebody, right? A lot of times folks want to be heard, right? They want to vent or want to be heard. I think the risk is when we say like, okay, well, I'll bring that up at the next board meeting, or I can help you with that, because then we're operating in an individual capacity that we just don't have. It's a good opportunity to be like, I hear you. I hear the frustration. Thank you for, letting me know. And then go to Sarah and say like, this is what I've heard. And then maybe that thing ends up on a board agenda. I mean, sometimes things, and maybe it doesn't because it's super not appropriate for it too, right? If somebody's complaining about a teacher or something, that needs to go through the complaint process. But maybe there is a bigger picture about the school thing that a number of you are hearing or something like that. You're letting your executive director know, and maybe that does become something that the board talks about. I think also in the middle of, or at the end of, or at each person, public comment, like, thank you for that. We will, if there are big questions about that, we will consult with our executive director about that, and not trying to answer questions in real time because we may get the answers wrong, or they may be contrary to what school is doing. And I know it's tough.
So can I just add to that? I think one of the things that I think just because historically some of these rules were new to this board, and there was a lot more interaction with staff and families. But I think sometimes my staff, if they disagree with my decision on something, they want to like rat me out to my boss, kind of that function, right?
Sure.
Here, Sarah did something I don't like, and I'm going to tell the board about it.
Right.
And I think there's room for that, but I think what I get a little bit worried about is when conversations are happening or emails are happening with staff, and the staff isn't referred to me so that I don't have any visibility of the problem, and then it comes into a board meeting as like an innocent question or like a topic that comes through a different topic. That's hard for me to manage, and it makes me concerned about process.
Yeah.
And sometimes the information, like, and then there's information that people shouldn't have too.
Yeah.
Like confidentiality feels like
Mhm.
it's been breached in one direction or another.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I see too.
To add to that, like my biggest concern with that situation you just brought up is, from what I've seen, normally it does not get brought up to the board. It gets brought up to an individual.
Individual or a subset of the board.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And my biggest concern with that is it creating a divisive atmosphere, because someone thinks that, oh, I raised this concern to the board, so obviously it's either going to get addressed or I'm going to be ignored.
Mhm.
When it didn't get brought up to the board, it got brought up with Jackie or Alex, and
It's not me. They don't email me no longer.
Alex.
Not ever. I've never
like
been
that.
that person.
Yeah, me neither. What a nice face. But like they go ahead and they bring stuff up with an individual, and then all of a sudden they think it's going to get addressed.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and then that resentment builds and stockpiles
Right.
until it blows up.
Right, because now you're not doing your job in their eyes.
Yeah.
Right. I think there is always an opportunity if somebody comes to you and they're like, I have this problem, I want your help. There's always an opportunity to explain what you can and can't do. Right. There's an opportunity for education there. And I think it's important to remember, and some board members have used this occasionally, especially if they're getting really pushed on, that, you know, if you were to investigate or assist somebody because you knew them or because they were coming to you and going around the system, but not somebody else who doesn't think to come to you or whatever, that's creating an inequity in the system, right? You're helping somebody because like they're of this thing, and none of us got on the board to create an inequity in the system.
Are you speaking to me as a parent, or are you speaking to me as a board member?
I have a, oh, right. No, you first. Seriously, it might be the same question.
I think that there are many ways that the system is not being worked on. First, some of us don't know the system, but I think, and like all of us, community members, staff, board, but also I think that we feel like it's ineffectual. And if especially people are told, whether it's staff, parents, whatever, don't go to the board, go to the ED, then they feel like, well, like what the hell is this for doing? Right? Like, and I've heard that from parents and from staff, like, you guys are out of touch, you're not doing anything, but we're also being told never to reach out to you. So they feel like we're just cut off, right? So it feels like an ineffectual system, right? So, and I think that it happens sometimes that people reach out to individuals because they feel like the board is ineffectual, but maybe if I can get in with this one person, it will, you know, like, and they can bring it up, and I get that frustration because it feels like the system is not, but the way it's designed is not working. The way it's designed for public comment, where we have to just sit there and look unempathetic, it doesn't feel like they've stopped coming and doing public comment in the last few months because it feels like it didn't change anything.
I mean, in all fairness, they never get into double comments.
And we don't really know
I
why.
wouldn't say it's dropped. I'd say it's pretty steady. But,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean-
like it's a lot.
For the last 2 years, it's been pretty steady, where like there's 1 or 2 hot button meetings a year where multiple folks come, but 9 times out of
Pitchforks.
Yeah.
But do you know that most people were like, most of the staff was watching last meeting on YouTube, right? We just didn't know it because we don't have it on the thing, right? So people are still watching, they're just not commenting because they feel like their comments don't do anything. Or they feel like they want to be anonymous and they can't be. So what happens if somebody has an anonymous comment? There's no way for them to have an anonymous.
Right.
Is
So-
there a way? Could you make a way?
I
Other
mean,
systems?
so you can't process an anonymous complaint. I mean, somebody could like set up a Gmail and write to you and not say who they are, but it's almost impossible to follow up on that if Sarah first can't reach out and try and say that. So then it's like, what is the purpose of anonymity, right? Like if you can't help because you can't process that, because you can't go back and say, you know, I need more information. And not that you are individually doing that, because for the most part, unless it's a complaint about Sarah, you're running it through the process first. It's either like, have you tried talking to the teacher? then next, I don't know if there's anybody between you and teachers, but like, have you, now your process is to go to the executive director. If you are still not satisfied with that answer, you can elevate that to the board at that point. So it's not like the board never has anything to do with anything.
They're
It's
the
just
first
like,
stop.
they're the last stop, right? Like board is the last stop, because the goal is that most things get worked out at their local level. Right?
I think particularly at a small school, and then you add charter to that, people are expecting direct input, and it's something I deal with my residents. The fact that you said you don't like something and it didn't get changed doesn't mean nobody's listening. It just means you aren't getting what you want.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't mean no one's hearing your issues, but just because you have the issue doesn't mean we're automatically going to do what it is you want.
Right. Well, and that's the problem with, like, you know, when we say, or when somebody says, I don't feel heard, doesn't mean you didn't do what I wanted you to do, right? Now, there are ways to make folks feel heard and be empathetic, but still understand that, like, and the board or the executive director still has to make a decision. Input is great, but the decision still may not be doing what you're asking for.
And Jessica, to your point, I feel like what you just said almost illustrates what I was saying with people say these things and all of a sudden they feel like action should be taken, but they didn't actually register anything to the board. Because I can think back maybe like 4 or 5 things in the last year have either come through the board email or like been brought to the board's attention, when I know there's a whole lot more out there that's getting said, but it's not getting brought up in the formal channels that it's supposed to. So when people take that informal step, they're like, oh, hey, I did it. Action should be taken now, but there's no formal anything being done. So that resentment builds because they said something, but it doesn't get brought up. Because we had that one email after the last meeting. We've had one formal complaint come through, maybe 2. Like it is a small handful of things that have been brought up in the formal channel for us to go and take action on. But if it doesn't get brought up in that way, like technically we cannot take action on it.
Do you have, when you respond via email or in person, do you have a little script in your head or in writing that you explain a little bit, like not only what the process is, but what you as an individual can and can't?
They don't, and I'm not even sure we have like a delegate, so sometimes different people will do it. I think it's supposed to be less.
I
Yeah,
usually
like
talk
after-
to
Right.
them. If I get an email, I'll talk to them and I
But it's-
tell them about the board. They usually have no idea how it works. And in a conversation recently, the last couple of weeks with the teacher, after about an hour, just listening and chatting, it came up to the point, like if she's got or he, the 7th grade teacher, for example, doesn't like something that Sarah's doing, and has tried or not tried, I don't know, and wants to change something that they feel like is not being changed in a way. Their avenue to the board, as I kind of saw it, as we talked about, were public comment, like outside of going to where they should go, public comment or an official complaint, and process it through that. It will either be moved or not moved. It didn't sit well, but I didn't know. I couldn't think of another avenue, but I said I would ask.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way, like, the first question is, have you tried talking to Sarah yet? If they haven't, that's where they go, right? Again, like, thank you for bringing this. I'm happy to help you figure out, where to go next. But the first thing they need to do is go there. If they don't like the decision that Sarah has made, then yeah, I mean, public comment, unless it's about a person, right? If they're complaining about another person, they can't come and do that in public. But then it is complaint as per your policy KL, which I know you have now, right? Yep. And I understand that feels very bureaucratic and it feels kind of impersonal. And like, that is it also avoids a lot of like every individual acting differently or trying to solve a problem, having different information than everybody else, and like going around your executive director. So there is that. I mean, those are the two things. Go talk to her. If you already have, you can register a complaint.
I feel like that's a lot harder for the empaths than the logic-driven people.
Yeah.
No shame. And to bring up, Karen, you brought up was it you that brought up the curriculum thing? And that is also very complicated because, right, the staff for like 2 years has wanted to do a survey. They did a survey.
I did a survey.
Or yeah, you did a survey. And it was said, like, it's going to go to Sarah or ED. This is going to go to the board. And then we got it back, but then we didn't get to read the comments. So the reason why we got that comment about curriculum is because we were like forecasting what it was about curriculum. And that person wanted to say, no, it's not that I don't want a curriculum. This is what my beef is with curriculum, right? So they got a chance to write comments, but only Sarah and Lester got to read them and we didn't. So like as a board, they thought they were writing comments to all of us and then we didn't get to read them. So that further impacts trust with the board that like, oh, we spent this time and now you're not even reading it, right? So what do we do with that when only one person of our board got to read them?
So how it happened was we had a staff member suggest to the board that we should issue a survey to the staff and see how it's going in scenarios.
Right.
And we defaulted to what we thought you would told us that should come from the executive director. So the executive director issued the survey.
And I will say it was delivered to me as an option, something that I could do if I felt it would be helpful. And when I looked at the example survey that was given to me, I said, I do think it would be helpful and I think we could do it annually and send it out to the staff for me to use for me.
So the answers came back. What role does the board play in the data that's collected from that survey? And if a teacher wanted to get that information, or a staff member wanted to get that information past that to us, again, public comment.
I mean, so a survey is a great way to, I mean, like that is outreach, right? Now, so when I administer surveys on behalf of schools and districts, two kinds of data, right? Like quantitative and qualitative, right? So because you can easily summarize the quantitative stuff, right? You've got stuff on a Likert scale or however you do it. And then everybody's input is in there without being identifiable. The problem with everybody reading comments is that you're probably going to know who wrote what.
Exactly. Yeah.
And especially in a small system. And then it's like, then there's bias that's involved in that, right? If you've got a great relationship with one teacher and like they wrote a comment that like impacts you more and you can identify that. I mean, this is what we all do, right? Like,
or you say, well, Lester's always complaining. So
right,
whatever.
exactly. So dismiss that. So what I do when I administer surveys for schools and districts is say, they're going to be open-ended questions. Your responses are going to be anonymous, confidential, and summarized by theme. And so what I will do is like take all the comments back and literally hand code them. Like this came up, this came up, this came up, this came up, and then present it to the board as like, here were the top themes that we heard. You know, like this curriculum meets all the standards and is inclusive and every kid can see themselves in that curriculum. This, you know, I mean, like whatever it is, and that's positive or negative, right? Like whatever the themes are, and I'll give them like the top 3 or 4 themes depending on how much pops up, so that like there are voices in there, but it also saves you from one anecdote here and there, which may again trigger some sort of, you know, bias or something, or you may be like finding yourself acting on an anecdote. And so but like if Sarah is reading these surveys and there's an anecdotal story in there that is serious, right? I mean, again, how does that person expect that to be addressed if they are unknown? And like, you know, and so then they need to talk to her first, right?
And to Sarah's credit, that is pretty much what you did.
And tell me the descriptors you use: confidential, something,
Anonymous and
and
summarized.
summarized
I,
by
I can make that more
top.
clear.
But yeah,
I
by
think,
theme.
I think
I
that's
think
I think that's the learning opportunity
Yeah.
from this one is not
Yeah.
not the way that you did it, just the way it's explained. And in future surveys, staff will probably know that a little bit better. But like, I think there's a learning opportunity from the way it's explained. And maybe I don't know Google Forms very well, but is there a way to take the essay ability away and just have like short answers kept to
I
50
did.
characters or
Limit,
whatever?
yeah, limit
Yeah,
the characters.
But then, I mean, it was helpful for me to read those. So I think
Yeah.
that making that more clear to staff is a great idea. I think the feedback that I got from that survey was extremely helpful. I presented all of the quantitative and summarized the comments because I think that's best practice. Some of the comments were also like breaching other people's confidentiality too, which is not okay.
Right.
So
Which the board should not have access to that data.
Were
right?
there, I'm just wondering, when you sent that survey out, was there a clear sort of guide of like, here's how I'm going to use this information, and also like, here are the rules for the survey, or was it pretty open-ended as far as the instructions go?
Oh, I think I said, I'm going to do this annually. Please know that it's anonymous, although the way the comments were written, it was clear on a few employees where they came from. And I said I would be sharing them with the board.
What got us into trouble is the original seed was the idea that the board would send out a survey.
That was that
So
I
some
would not
people
see.
never shifted from that, and if they didn't read the paragraph
Oh, it was
setting it
their,
up,
they
then
thought it was their
the
opportunity to
assumption
talk
was
smack
that it
And
about
was
that's
sent
stuff.
to
why
the
they let
board,
it
'cause that
rip.
was where the
Right.
Been a couple of
came
years.
from.
Yeah.
But it got
It's fine.
Hey,
The
just
other-
be transparent. Be honest.
The other thing that I do on surveys is, when I'm sending them out, there's a whole thing about like, here's the purpose of this, here's how it's going to be used, here's how it's not going to be used. This is not an avenue to submit a complaint. If you have a formal complaint, here's the process, so that folks don't think that like, this is my avenue to submit a formal complaint.
Okay, so
Well, but that makes it sound like they can't read anything.
Complaint.
No, it's just
It's
like,
just never
as
the
you're,
reason that.
as you're writing, like, if they are saying, I don't like somebody's performance, right? Like, that's probably not what you're asking. First of all, that's not going to be part of the survey, but like, that's trying to direct them to the right process. So again, just, clarifying expectations as much as you can.
I would do that.
So follow up on that one, that having not talked to the teacher or seen the comments and everything, the teacher followed up in email. They like the summation I got from it was they didn't feel like that their comment was represented appropriately, and they wanted to clarify what their intention was with their comment, which I still have not seen the original comment. Is there anything wrong?
She didn't think I summarized it well, but I was actually talking about her comment. I was talking about somebody else.
I remember the response.
It's even
Is-
better.
Is there anything wrong with her sending that email for clarification and giving us more
Informational.
detail? Like for her choosing to provide that information?
So you're
Um,
never going to be able to help what comes to you, right? You're going to get emails like, and that's fine. I think that like the important part is like, well, it's always helpful to set as many expectations in advance as you can. Like, this is what the survey is and not.
Yes.
But then you're going to get comments that like, you can't stop them from coming and you're going to read them. I think that then it's about how you respond and direct that. Like maybe reminding like, this was summarized by theme and by what was most common. Thank
So-
you for letting me know, like,
And I didn't respond to that because I was assuming Lester was going to go and
Right,
respond
yeah.
to it.
Sorry. That was me. I was just checking our live stream was working. Please feel free to
Oh, fine.
continue.
So in that, is it an appropriate response? Like, hey, thanks for sending this over. We will take this into consideration.
Or further, like, would
We
you mind if
appreciate
I
you.
shared this with the rest of the board? That's sort of what I
Well,
was
she
thinking.
sent that to the board email anyway, so it was like.
But in the cases where we're getting, if certain folks are getting individual emails,
yeah.
is that an appropriate response? Like,
I
thank
kind
you?
of like, Patrick, are you talking to me as a parent or as a board member?
Mhm.
I think that really sets a tone of what you can and can't do.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So
Lets me know what hat to put on.
often, I mean, I think like, you know, I think that's fine, like responding as an individual, this is fine. I'm gonna send it to our board president for response. And then you can copy everybody so that like, that the board knows what the response is, or maybe it goes to Sarah. It depends on, although usually when a board president or board chair responds, it's, you know, thank you for this. We've heard, you know, like you're not complaining, like I'm, you know, hearing your issue, I'm hearing your frustration or whatever it is. I'm copying our executive director to follow up with you. And because like the vast majority of the time, it's still an administrative issue, right? It's still not a board issue.
It almost always is, and it usually takes some sort of a conversation to explain that. It takes a dialogue and they say, oh, I didn't realize what a board does. What happens in extreme case? Let's say Sarah does this evaluation next year and she's checked out since December and the evaluation is miserable. Like the comments are awful, all the numbers are worst case scenario. And Sarah's like, well, I'm gonna put that in my pocket and not share anything with the board. It's my survey. The board doesn't.
Oh yeah, what's my obligation to share?
Yeah,
that
does she,
information?
I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, shit, you know, can she keep it all to herself? Is her survey? Is it?
Well, I mean, if the board expects information that's come back from something like that, you can direct your executive director to give it to you, right? To go through the process of like whatever. And if the board president needs to see it because there is like some lack of trust going on, you know, like I think that's okay, you know, for the board president to see it, and because you need to hold your executive director accountable as well, right? And if there is lack of accountability or something like that, it's okay to step in. It's usually the board president.
She gives all 10s and the staff's like, nobody marked 10
Right.
on that.
Right.
Oh, I mean, trust but verify.
Sorry. Right. Right. And then
Probably
there's
gonna
more
happen.
information that you need, which, you know, you can get. And again, as I've probably said before, like, and we're obviously being hyperbolic to make a point here, right? Is that if, you know, if at some point because of that or anything else, you feel like there's a performance issue with your executive director, you can have a conversation in executive session about that, right? I mean, so like whatever, but you know, you as a board, not as individuals, can direct your executive director to like, hey, the survey went out, you haven't provided any information on this, we need this information.
Before we move on, I just wanted to address something that Jessica asked about. The reason Lester saw the comments and others didn't was because he was responding to the same individual who had emailed you. So I gave him information because he asked me to be prepared for his conversation with the employee.
Okay.
That
So that's
wasn't-
kosher that he can read it, but the rest of us can't too? Or is that not kosher?
Well, generally, the board president has more involvement and is, you know, more of a close partner with the ED than anybody else is. It doesn't mean he can make decisions on his own, right? There's no, unless the board has said, go ahead and take this, you know, and I mean, like sometimes in contract negotiations, the board president will like, you know, with the board's permission, will go do something discreet like that.
Yeah.
But unless the board has given any of you permission to go and act on your own, no one can.
I think that kind of falls into laying the expectations out ahead of time. Like maybe next time, that next year, that could be set a little bit more clear ahead of time, so that way there's no surprise on the back end.
Yeah.
Exactly. Transparency. Go back to the values page.
Absolutely.
Is there, I mean, what it sounds like to me, as you're a caring, disinterested third party, is that there is an education piece that's missing, right? Between the board and the staff and or board and community. Is there something you feel like you could do that would, you know, fit the ethos of the school to better educate your staff and community about what it is that you do? Like, is it a session like that maybe nobody will come to, but like you can have it
If we
anyway?
did it at like an event, like the spring thing, 4 minutes or 2 minutes, 30 seconds, I don't know.
Or
and
is
I-
there something you can put in?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding because I'm thinking of the survey that went out to evaluate the board and they kind of roasted us and we aren't in the halls of the school all the time. And the one that personally I enjoyed was there should be like term limits and more people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, good luck with that.
Right.
I think that was directed to me.
I don't
I
think
mean,
it was.
Lester's been here for a while too.
So it was
Yeah,
directed to
kind
me.
of.
I don't know.
But there was a lot of ill will that was clearly related to, yeah, you guys have no idea what the board does, is supposed to do.
Or just
The
define
one
board
thing that's
members.
confusing is on the data and monitoring.
Uh-huh.
We're supposed to monitor progress and take corrective action
Mhm.
using the data, but when you don't always have all the data, and what's our role in
Smart
taking
goals.
corrective action?
Great question. So when you are determining what is important to monitor from your school goals, from your strategic priorities, that is the point. Like, it's right then that you set your monitoring plan for the year. What and working with your ED, because she's going to know way more about like what information and data is coming when. What does your calendar look like for the next year, as far as when are we going to get updates on what, and what information is going to come to us, who's going to bring it to us, and then like making a plan for building those things into your agenda over the course of the year. So that's the monitoring piece. And then of course things come up, right? I mean, throughout the year, but you can do some planning about, we know that this information comes in December. We will talk about this in January, right? Like that's our, holding the system accountable then is about, your executive director is accountable for her part in this, right? That includes like implementation of policy, of whatever else you've got going on. That includes evaluations of staff, right? That includes communication with the board, providing information. And if there is corrective action that needs to be taken, that may or may not be on the board, right? That is a collaborative, like let's say you're not hitting goals or a specific goal. Well, depending on the goal, whose job is that to come up with a plan for then meeting? What does that look like to come up with a plan for meeting that goal? It might be like a team of people that Sarah puts together that are going to develop a plan for, okay, we didn't hit this. This is what we're going to do. And then the board, again, is monitoring that. Okay, so now what is the information that comes to us? Again, in the, at the end of it, we're still being hyperbolic. Like, if there is a performance aspect to it, you take that up in your evaluation with your ED. If it's just like, yeah, not every school hits its goals. This is the progress that we've made. This is the progress we intend to continue. It might also be about changing the goal a little bit, right? Because if you've set a really lofty goal and the school has done everything it said it was going to in the plan and you haven't quite hit it, maybe we need to calibrate a little bit, and working with your ED to what does that look like to calibrate.
And so right now you have 2 sets of data that I'm reporting on. There's my performance evaluation data, so all the reading scores, math scores, whatever the other one was, scores. And then there's the monthly school-wide data, like attendance, enrollment, fundraising, whatever it is. And I think, to Kristen's point, that's when we decide that's when we start monitoring that. And if those are what's valuable, then that's what we're tracking, not necessarily tracking how many times you get a complaint email from my staff, but unless that's what you want to be tracking, but like decide it and then we track it.
Okay, one more question on public comment. If they comment on something that's not true, it's just totally not factual, and it's a very easy correction, we still just ignore it.
I would let Sarah answer that.
So during the meeting,
So I just went through this as well, right? I just had a crazy board meeting where a bunch of people came up and they were just saying things that weren't true. We as a board did not respond, because if I as an individual start responding, I'm fighting with the public now, and that doesn't look good, and that's not going to build like good community will. And also, I may be wrong, like, and nobody else can control me can control for that in the meeting. And if you try to control for that, then the board is fighting. Right. So usually it's like, you know, we're going to refer this to our ED for follow-up. And you can't always help when people come and say things that are untrue. But maybe there's a way to then, so, you know, in my case, the superintendent sent out a whole district-wide email, not saying this person was wrong, but we understand there was some confusion about this. Here's what's happening. In a very kind, transparent, not pointing fingers at anybody way, but that we can address those things to try and clear up confusion, even though rumors take off like wildfire.
Whoever speaks first is right.
Do we state that in the meeting that like, is it just Sarah, can we trust you to go ahead and respond to that? Or like, Sarah, you will go and respond to that later? Or is it?
We're going to refer that to our ED.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just.
Sometimes I'll be, if that's come up, sometimes I'll be able to weave the truth or the answer into my update if it's relevant. And I think you've done that with your treasurer's update sometimes too.
And I think that is appropriate as well, because if you can say, and that also sounds like you're listening to folks in real time, right? If Sarah can say in her update, you know, I just heard some confusion about X, this is what's going on, that's okay.
Is it best when those are stated and like I'm going to refer that over to our ED, even if she addresses it in the public or in the update, is it best to also like follow up via email if she's able to, just so that way there's
to the person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair, right? Then the person gets an answer, but so does the whole community, because other people are listening too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, either in an update or in an email or something if it's important.
Hi.
Hi.
No, I think
there's
this
no
is great.
confusion on. You didn't respond to me.
So answering kind of that question, I don't know if anybody has kids in the Columbus School District, but anytime there's any discrepancies, the superintendent gets on and sends a blast, but not blasting parents or anything, but addressing the misconceptions or what happened at school board meetings. And she does a phenomenal job of addressing it without blame. My second piece to this is, this is my opinion, is that we really need to have, in my profession, it's called health literacy. I don't know if it's the same thing in your medical, but I don't know what it's called in school. Okay, education literacy, to where we really need to have like a third grade level of understanding of what is the board's goals, what is the expectation to the board and the ED on our website, where it's super simplistic and really breaking down, chunking out, kind of like, I know that we have all this in our bylaw, and we don't know.
Nobody's reading your bylaw.
No one reads it.
Well, and it's on the thing, but just where all of the comments or things that we're having maybe some issues with, I feel like we need to break that down at an easy third grade level to where it is inclusive for everybody, because we don't know what the level of parents are here, right? We have super educated PhDs, doctors, and maybe just the high school level.
I know when we write things, the recommendation is 5th grade reading level, which I've learned from using the word function. Means no words with 3 or more syllables.
Yes.
That's a nice rule of thumb when you're.
And I do a 3rd grade level.
And AI can help with all that.
And no big edu-speak, right?
Right.
Like,
So if we can meet people where they're at, we're approaching them with the education behind, breaking it down. This is my OTs. Breaking it down, super simplistic, to where hopefully we can kind of stop these accusations or emails going out, to where it is across the board. You know, not everybody reads, but at the same time, it's at least we have it on there. We can all have a script if we get emails from parents or educators, staff, to where we have that same script. We're all on the same page. I think that would be really helpful for all of us.
That's a really good working session topic.
Our board emails allow us to go ahead and make a just simple template that we can all go ahead and just click.
I think that would be great. It simplifies it for us, our daily lives of busyness, and then parents, teachers, staff already know what's to expect. Simple jargon, not having to read everything we have to go. keep it simple.
Nice.
Following,
Yeah.
so I'm pivoting a little bit. Things we get too in the weeds on. I'm going to use the example of curriculum, the way that we selected curriculum this last year. So we had not had math and reading curriculum for a year or two.
We did. They were just different.
Oh,
Yeah, we
great.
did.
Okay. So I remember when we were selecting new curriculum, like we had board members who were diving in, like evaluating the curriculums and everything. There wasn't a
That's
curriculum.
actually what I was referring to when I said we struggle with
Yeah.
our role. We ended up
So,
here and I was like, well, eventually we'll circle back.
so I'm trying to figure out like things like that. There wasn't a curriculum committee. We like, so it was almost like we were the curriculum committee. Some people were diving into the curriculum and saying like, this is the one we should use. No, this is the one we should use.
As the board.
Oh, yeah.
We have
Oh,
one of those
yeah.
meetings, yeah.
Yeah.
For things like curriculum, where does our role stop if there is no committee, like if there's no curriculum committee?
Well, and there
We
was,
have a RACID chart.
I-
to the answers.
there was also, well, did you talk to this person? Well, that's not what I heard they thought about it. Yeah, we were way, and I think
Like
some of
it was
that,
last minute too. It was super right. It was like July, we got to get this in.
well, but I think some of that falls into that small school input and just our lack of knowledge of, hey, this isn't actually our thing.
Because I mean, looking at our roles, my initial thought right now is that it should have been this exceeds the $1,000 commitment that Sarah's able to go and do autonomously. Yes or no, we authorize the expenditure for the curriculum, not we are selecting the curriculum.
Right.
There is a big picture overlap with the curriculum because we used to not have curriculum in a number of areas. And teachers were project based and they had their Tupperware things, kits of things that they did.
Yeah.
And then when that crop of teachers were lost, we had newer teachers, and they wanted something curriculum because they were dealing with a different situation post pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's not just curriculum. I think we fall into the, let's tell Sarah how she should deal with this employee or who's hired. And oh my gosh, I heard this person is upset and they may leave, and we try to poke our noses in that. I think we really, as a group, struggle with that.
So let me give an example of how in the future maybe curriculum might work. I not the board, but I would recommend a committee that the board is not on, right? And so you've got like a group, you've got Sarah, and she puts together a group of staff, maybe a couple of family members on that as well. And then their job within the budgetary limits that you have is to go and evaluate whatever they want to, right? They go through a process of evaluation. I myself have sat on curriculum committees, and then they come to you with an informed recommendation. And for the most part, like, you know, if they can show alignment to standards and, you know, whatever else reflects the values of the school and how the, you know, project-based is it, you know, because you're not going to adopt like a direct instruction curriculum. You're going to adopt something that conforms to your project-based standards. Like, you're going to trust that your executive director led a process, and I mean, she can explain to you like what you went through, and then you're going to talk about adoption. And if that is that is an administrative process that happens outside the board, right? And then if that comes to you as a fully fledged recommendation, then you consider that. And like, I will say that probably the job of the board at that point is to say, please show us evidence that this aligns to Oregon standards, right? And that it stayed within the budget, and like, you know, who was on your committee. And, you know, when I, as a board member, have seen presentations about that, there's representatives from the committee. And if somebody's like, this wasn't my first choice, you can hear that too. But what is the recommendation overall look like, and then you adopt?
If you have a recommendation, but the board doesn't see it aligning with the broader vision, like, oh, this is all worksheets and we want
Right.
manipulators.
Right, yeah, you don't have to approve it.
And then we tell them to go back to the drawing board, at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ideally, they present with enough time to
With
go
the
back to
new
the drawing board.
Right, exactly.
So, I feel it's so much simpler to do executive director committees.
Mhm.
Able to say, like, you need these community representatives on your ED committee, or
No, because then it becomes a board committee, and then that committee is subject to public meeting law and all that
So-
that comes with.
So
So,
if we don't like the committee, we can
So-
then say, well, we don't like your recommendation at that point, or.
I mean, you don't have to take any recommendation. I mean, the board can do what it wants to with a recommendation. Like what you're asking your ED
Like,
to
if we want
do.
phonics in the literacy curriculum and there's no phonics in the literacy.
Well, you can also like foreground that, right? Like you can talk, and before a committee is formed, before folks start looking at things, like there can be a collaborative conversation about like, here are our basic expectations about what you'll go look at. And then hopefully what you're getting back then is aligned with what you've, what you've set out to do, what you've asked your executive director to go do. What was the other example? Staff? Yeah. Okay. Staff hire, I forgot. Jackie, tell me again. Staff hiring, staff,
I think we fixed
No,
just
so much
staffing in general.
hiring, yeah, how you're dealing with staff
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Name titles of staff.
That's much, right? I think a pretty clear dividing line is you have one employee, she has all the rest. If you find that, like, you feel as a board that there is a performance, area of not managing staff well or not doing that part of her job, you can deal with that in evaluation. And you can have an evaluative conversation at any time during the year. It does not have to be at the end. But it should always be like, not an I don't like this person, but is our executive director performing to standards? And if you don't feel like she is, or there's a concern, then you have an evaluative conversation.
And to confirm what you said earlier, if there's like a trust but verify situation where, say, we want to go ahead and make sure that if Sarah tells us, like, I'm meeting with every staff member on a monthly basis and I'm taking notes on everything, the right thing would be, like, most likely Lester as board president would go ahead and review those notes. It would not go out to everyone because there's a whole lot.
No, I wouldn't.
It-
Yeah, no
but-
personnel records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if there's like a verification process needed, it would be Lester who just like,
It would be the board president,
Okay.
but I still would not recommend looking at anybody's like notes or evaluate or stuff that would go in their personnel file.
something along the lines where it'd be confidential for the board to look at, but like I'm trying to think what it would
I
be.
think it would mostly be like, what is the process? Show us the process, right?
Okay.
Like, what are you using, but not anything identifiable to anybody.
Like the survey results, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I know
or the
we're supposed to take a break.
forms she
now,
uses
temporarily.
for would be a verification. These are the forms I use when I do this.
Mhm.
Like when I meet with
Yeah.
people, we go through this.
Right.
I sign and they sign.
Right. Right.
We hug.
So I did schedule a break at 10:45.
Mhm.
Do people want to do that? Is this a good time for bio break and?
Yes.
Okay.
Then we'll go. Okay.
How long do you want, Clear? A second.
Yes.
Do you want 10 minutes? What would you like?
Yeah.
10 minutes? Okay, sure. See you back shortly before 11.
It's my little vest out of my car that I forgot to bring in.
No, I turned off the heat even though I knew Jessica's no, I get it's freezing in here.
It's good to stand up for a minute.
Yeah.
What if we just, you're always moving in your job. You're just like, room.
I woke up and went for a run because if I'm gonna sit for
You would.
hours I have to
She has
go.
seen us tackle on the sheep pen. And I goes, I'm like,
They're really sheep. Get that
30s
250 pounds.
I had that sheep, and all the other ones went in there. Of course, there's one.
Don't
You know.
forget to grab speech if you want.
So you're trying to get her.
Trying to get it into a pen because we're sharing this afternoon. And guys, you know, you get that crazy look in their eye, like, oh no, this is gonna go. Like, we're not gonna go easy. And they went in there, and I don't know, there's only a shoot like that. Oh,
Knock me down.
knocked me down.
We had a crazy-eyed cow, and we're trying to get it in this. The boys and I mean, the boys weren't very old, and it actually tried to jump the fence, but it got stuck. And I thought it was going to kill one of us.
Yeah.
And it's like Sam was cussing and he was pushing it. Oh,
Years ago, I had a ewe who got its head between the electric fence up and then around the other one, and was stuck in there, and it was getting shocked every bit. And I didn't have time to go up, turn the fence off, so I just grabbed it. Now I'm getting shocked as I'm trying to get this head around there. And then as soon as I got its head out from the other one, it just belted me right in the stomach and knocked me into the electric fence.
now do you share or do you have somebody come in?
Once a year we have somebody come
Come
in.
in.
Otherwise I'll share them. But yeah, one for the quickie in the spring.
Yeah.
The guy who does all the forages down at
Uh-huh.
the fairgrounds just comes over after it's down there. So he gets it.
Our neighbor. Well, we call her Crazy Catherine. She has
Morales? No.
she has sheep, but they'll go 2 or 3 years without being sheared.
Oh, did they
And
shed or?
They look so sad.
Yeah.
And then she won't answer her phone, but she listens to her messages. And she's probably been divorced 25 years, and she still has his voice.
Yeah.
Catherine, you have a dead sheep out there.
Oh no.
Catherine, you have a dead sheep there. And then last summer, it was like, Catherine, your dog is dead out in the pasture.
Oh no.
I don't know why she thinks she has to have. She doesn't take care of anything.
No, that's not good.
It's awful,
Oh, that's terrible.
terrible. So when's the track state meeting?
We had JV districts last night, and then varsity districts Wednesday and Friday next week, and then the state meet the week after that.
So how did your JV kids do?
It's interesting because you get one, if you do one event varsity, you can't do anything in a JV meet. So you got to be JV in all your events,
Oh.
kind of. So it's a different crew than you would normally get, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so I didn't have like any guy pole vaulters because he's throwing a javelin on. The girls did quite well. Silverton was strong. Golly.
They were?
They kicked their butt yesterday. We finished second, I think, in the JV meet, which,
Yeah, that's good.
you know, winning the JV meet doesn't mean anything because you
Right.
could have obviously pulled the kids and won.
Right.
But I was surprised how strong Silverton's mugs were in some of them. So I'm a little nervous about next week. We're trying to repeat as champions, you know, and that doesn't happen very often. You remember the Woods, Lorena Woods, and they were sprinters in the late 80s, early 90s, just like dominant force, like you gotta have.
I got these little nuggets.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I
Lorena
got
Woods was the girl,
I would try one of these.
and
And what is cardamom? Cardamom is like kind of a little
she
bit
won
of a
the Type 10
spicy-
championship.
Yes,
Give it
I
a
do
try.
remember.
100-meter champion in the
Yes.
Type
They're
10.
lightly
Remember
sweet.
them? Like, they were huge.
We really have
I had
enough
completely
to
forgotten their name, but I ran
I really have enough.
into them. She
Maybe
coaches
I'll,
at Central Tech.
Oh, that was good.
And it just kind of set me down this, oh man, yeah. Like, I was like 10 when they were doing their things.
Wow.
But she won her Tech 10 championship at USC at 88 at the same meet that my cousin won the Tech 10 championship in the steeplechase.
Oh, really?
I can't remember interacting with them. You know, just got like, they're not, you don't get that many secretary championships,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's
And
exciting.
then also she made the national team, and my cousin won the NCAA's that year.
Really?
In the steeplechase, and she didn't win it, but like, oh yeah, anyway, yes. And then my brother was a little bit younger.
I am unable to.
I feel like one of them was around my sister's age. And they're a big deal. Like,
That is a
like
big deal.
10-6, still hold the records.
Um,
10-600 is lightning fast. It's like,
So how many kids on the varsity, polo?
I've got a lot of, well, varsity you just have 6, but I've got a lot of pole vaulters. Not as many as I've had, because
Yes. So I read all the
as a
notes.
kid involved.
Mhm.
I've learned years ago that the more depth you have, the better, the sharper your
Yeah.
spear tip is. And people want to try stuff if they can come over and be better than 15 kids, but if there's only 2 and they're third, different dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So
You want as
get them
many.
all over, and then you'll figure out where the pain is. So I had up to
I love
30,
these cool.
Oh, really?
So awesome.
but right now I've only got about 10. And high jumpers, I got about 20.
I don't know how. Were you a pole vaulter?
Yeah.
How do you ever get the courage
You don't
to?
get to do a whole lot of it anymore.
You move them up slowly.
It's hard.
Move them up slowly. You remember them Robinses?
Oh,
There?
yeah.
So Isaac Babcock started this. He tried it when he was a senior and we were freshmen.
Oh, really?
Simon and I, and Isaac was trying it. And Simon, Isaac got 10 feet. We thought, man, you're stuck. Because we didn't have any culture there. They did it in the 80s, but nobody had done it.
Yeah.
Oh. Did you hear about Frank?
I did.
Biology undergrad, and I worked in the whole.
I haven't reached out, but I just heard about it a couple days ago. 2 days ago. It was last week. Yeah.
I just like mental health and.
Have you talked to anybody over there?
I sent a note to Gretchen. I told her, and, you know, he was the same age as
Anything could happen.
one of the, and,
Generally, it's a lot of.
you know, made a big,
Trash.
He just said,
Environment, for young, it's just another-
He was a jolly guy.
it was just, that's the best way.
Jovial and jolly.
He
and
always had.
laughing,
and
always
what-
had some joke
We-
and belly laugh.
The memory we served is
Yeah.
when he went, there was a wedding, a local kid, and he brings 2 shirts to every wedding. Because he dances and he's
Gets all sweaty, yeah.
wet. I mean, not just a little dripping, and he's on the floor the whole time.
Yeah.
And evidently their whole family would move the furniture, and that was like Friday night fun.
Right, dance.
And they would all dance, and it was amazing. So, no, it's hard to believe. And I don't understand, who's the third person I know that had, septic.
Is that what it was? Okay.
And see, they finally moved him, he was off the machine, and they moved him to Dallas to a rehab place.
I heard
And,
they thought he was kind of out of the woods.
and he was doing much better. He could stand by himself, but he couldn't walk. Yeah.
Do you want me to text or email me?
And then, no, it's
I can do
just
either
like,
one, but email's slightly easier.
too sad. Just very sad.
We both are like, man, maybe we need to learn some ways of not doing this. But
Yeah.
We all just like.
Well, anyway, Isaac started this full ball team.
Because that's the
And then,
and lots of-
Rob, he played golf.
Yeah.
He would come out and mess around with us. Cause Steve Losey gave us the keys to the ship, full ball ship all summer.
Oh, really? Now,
So you just go over there. and-
oh, it's Mike was Kurt's age. I think.
Mike, yeah. So Matt was a tremendous full ball.
Maybe, didn't he do soccer?
Yeah, he did soccer.
In the fall?
Mike was a great soccer player.
It was
Yeah,
Matt
in the fall. Yeah.
that was Kurt's age.
Matt went
I never could remember the
13
order.
something. He had some great vaults in there.
We always wanted him to do baseball, but Kurt would, or Frank would just tease us. You don't play baseball, you just play soccer. And he was always, Kurt played soccer before he did football, that age, you know?
Yeah.
And
wisdom. And
There was
there's no way of
Matt
No,
and
but he needs to be
there was a Babcock, Sean,
John.
Kurt, and
that's what I found
Colby
was like,
Jagger. You know Jagger?
oh yeah, I know Kobe Jagger.
And
Jagger
they
live
were-
right next to him. Yeah.
They were just the studs.
Yeah.
on
Kobe.
that.
Kobe was a great soccer player.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Tennis.
Dennis. Oh yeah, Dennis too. Yeah, that's what he was. Tennis.
That's when he decided not to play baseball. He wanted to do tennis. Great families, all of them.
Yeah. I think 4 Babcocks, or 4 Morales ended up vaulting pretty well. See,
we ready to resume?
If anybody wants extra points, the swallow is back in the gym. You know how to get it to rehome.
Rehome.
My parents used to have
Everybody, I hope that got you something that you needed. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We can interrupt and just talk about whatever.
No, I have no.
We will see what we can get through in the next hour. Why are you not working?
even though we side railed you, I think it was important stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that is what is important. Is not that I get through my slides, it's that you get what you need.
I'm getting a lot out of this. I'll just say
Good.
that right now. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Just to go through this a little bit, you know, while we know that there are positive ways that a board can impact student outcomes, there are also some negative ways. And so these are the things we try to avoid. So here are some things that are associated with negative impacts. One is that meetings are less orderly, obviously lack of respectful engagement. You know, this is when you're not getting along with each other. That's hard. Less time spent on student achievement. And I don't just mean scores. I mean, like, how are you learning that your students are okay, that they are learning? And so obviously there are other things we have to listen to and take care of, but just remembering that, like, we are also talking about students here. Members seeking to advance their own agendas. You know, we all come to board work with, I want to contribute in this way. I really want to help in this way. But, you know, if we come to board work with, I'm getting on the board because I want to see this teacher fired, right? That's an agenda. That is not a goal, right?
Wow.
And there is some research that shows that members that come to the board with their own agendas, once they start getting professional development, that agenda kind of goes away because they realize, oh, I didn't know what the board did. Less effective working relationships with each other and others, less reliance on the administrator for advice and input. So, you know, your executive director is your educational lead. And so when boards just don't listen to that person or don't rely on them for information and advice, that can harm student outcomes. And less focus on policy. So we talked a lot about this, like staying up here to the extent possible. Other research shows that when you're not really aware of initiatives going on at school, when you don't really know what's going on, that's not great. making excuses. So this is that external pressure thing, blaming students for lower performance, blaming families, blaming, I mean, there are always reasons that, we want to improve it. We're not seeing things where they are, but this is more talking about that. If we only didn't have those kids, right? Like, what is the acceptable percentage of students that we don't want to see achieve? And it should be 0, right? Micromanagement. I will say that that with micromanagement also is the rubber stamp board. Like, we don't want to see either end of those.
We're not the rubber stamp, we're more of the micro.
When staff don't know the board, right, and don't know what the board does, we spent a long time talking about this, but that can be harmful. And then anecdotes, it's that bias thing, and personal experiences driving decisions instead of information. Again, you're all going to have stories and stuff, but like, I've seen boards like really focus on one thing, one story that they heard, and then make a decision for the entire system based on this one story that they. I'm going to be really aware of our time. And a lot of these things we've talked about before. So here's governance and management, right? Like you're doing policy, you're doing budget adoption, you're doing program adoption, curriculum adoption, that is a common theme here, community engagement, and doing that informed oversight and monitoring. That is the in-between micromanaging and rubber stamp. That informed oversight piece where you've got enough information and you're interested enough to make good decisions. You can't just
For informed oversight and monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
But you just said that we want to rely on our admin for advice and decision making. Where else are we getting information besides admin?
So that is a lot of it, right? Is like she's going to bring you a lot of data, a lot of, stories about what's happening at school, a lot of the like programmatic stuff, a lot of, what is going on. The vast majority of your connection to what is going on is going to come through your ED. Obviously, you all have different experiences. We just talked about you're hearing from a lot of things. What do you do with that? But, also if, I don't know if this ever happens, but if Sarah like brings a team member or a teacher or somebody else to come in and give information as well, like sometimes, like you want to hear about 3rd grade, let's bring the teacher in to talk about that at a board meeting, or something like that. Or you want to hear about a program, you want to hear about our Jedi, team, like let's bring, or whatever it is, like let's bring members of the committee to come talk about that. So that's where you're getting most of your information.
So if the ED is working on a project, and let's say 9 out of 10 samples of what she's working on are in this direction, and there's one outlier and you go a different direction. And she brings it to the board and says, yeah, the general consensus is X. And then we hear through a back channel from the outlier that wasn't what we all wanted. Or something like that. How do we evaluate what we're getting from the other ear from what the ED is?
I mean, I still think it goes back to what we just talked about, right? Like you can't help what comes to you. Somebody says that's not what I wanted, but again, we're making decisions based on the system, right? Not on individual anecdotes. So you can hear that, but and if they've got like, if somebody comes and says like, again, hyperbole, what you were just presented as far as the process went is not accurate. It's nothing like what was just described to you. It was this. Again, you're still taking that up with your administrator. You're going back to her and saying like, can you show us, the process, evidence of the process. So it's still coming back to your relationship with her when you're hearing.
And it's like the need of what we were saying, if somebody fact checks us, or if we fact, it's also
right. So for the management side, right, your ED gets to implement policy and any administrative regulations that go along with that. She gets to spend the budget. She gets to implement programs. She and whatever system you set up for this is going to recommend curriculum. Both of you do community engagement, but that's going to look different, right? Like she's in the building every single day. She's talking to families. She's talking to staff. Like that's that kind of on the ground community engagement. however you do that as a board, like what your responsibility is, like, are you throwing the big event every year? Are you responsible for that? Are you, are you networking with your personal and professional networks to like get support or whatever that looks like on the board? That's probably a bigger picture thing. And then she's providing you the data and information. These are just, big components, those differences. I went over that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, let's see. I'm looking at time. Just to go over this again, there is a piece of research out there that shows that when all of the board believes that all students can learn, and that is not perform at a certain level, that is just learn, that measurably impacts student outcomes. And just that shared belief, because, when you think of the opposite, right? When there are folks that just, not every kid here can even learn, that impacts how you make decisions. That impacts how you want to allocate budget and resources, what you want to, like how you want to adopt program or policy. I mean, it's going to impact how you as a board function and relative to your belief about your students. I'm not going to go over that. Did I go over these last year?
I think the first training, but not last year.
Not last year?
Review.
Okay, let's do this. So when we talk about the big roles of the board, I just talked about governance and management, but the model that we use at OSBA is called balanced governance. And it is a heavily researched model written by Dr. Tom Alsbury. He's got a book about it. He teaches all over the world. And through research of his own and compilation, it's not a mega study or anything, but or meta study, but he's compiled sort of this 12 rules of the board. And all of these show that if you're working toward these, not doing them perfectly, but if you've got these things in mind and you're doing them, then you're going to positively impact students. And so that first one is that vision directed planning. So, have you got a vision for your school? Are you aiming at it? Have you set goals around that? What are your strategic priorities? And then have you involved other folks in setting those? So a lot of times this looks like strategic planning and involving your community, involving your staff to the extent that it's appropriate, involving your students. And so that's kind of the foundation for everything else. Community engagement is important, supporting those collaborative partnerships, again, however that looks here. But, as we're talking, there is this education gap between the community and you right now. And so engaging them in that way, and at the very minimum, helping figure out, helping explain what the board does and doesn't do. Effective leadership. This is your leadership. This is modeling an empowered style of leadership. Part of that last piece, align authority and responsibility so that decisions can be made at the most local level. What we just talked about is a really good example of that. Who does this go to? Where do these decisions get made? And also modeling everything else I'm going to go through. Modeling, you all take this job very seriously. This is an intense, volunteer position, and that you are responsible for not only a school, but the health of a 501c3 nonprofit organization, right? Which is, that's a bigger job than a district board. Accountability we talked about, so I won't go too deeply into that. How do you monitor the system to the extent possible, aligning your policy and resources with your strategic vision and goals? I always recommend this. Do you have a goal setting session or a retreat every year or around every year? No?
We did last year.
Okay. If you're setting goals at that retreat, is it in the summer? When do you do it? Fall. You do it in the fall? Okay. I always recommend that you do it before budget season, because what's really tough is when you allocate and identify what the budget's going to be, and then you go set goals when you already know what the budget's going to be. So it, a lot of boards are like, we have our August retreat. I'm like, you just adopted your budget, right? Like, so I always recommend having it prior to budget season so that when you set goals and talk about initiatives, to the extent possible, you can then align your budget to those. Using data, again, we talked about this, knowing how your school is measuring, if students are learning, how they're learning, if they're doing okay. And again, all of this means information as well. So this can be financial information and any other information that comes to you to monitor improvement and progress. Cultural responsiveness is one, recognizing that kids come to you in an authentic way, who they are is welcome and inclusive, and ensuring that that environment exists. And then reducing and eliminating barriers to access, right? Which I heard a lot of you say. Applying diverse perspectives to policy and program approvals sometimes looks like an equity lens. Like that is often what that looks like. Culture and climate, that is that creating that expectation that all students can learn, making sure that you are modeling a positive and safe environment, that you're modeling professional and respectful relationships. You as a board really do help set what the climate looks like at school, what the culture is of the school, and you set expectations for what that's also going to be. So, I heard a lot of you talk about, hey, curriculum and whatever else needs to be inclusive. Like this needs to be a place where students feel welcome and accepted. That, like modeling that, talking about that out loud at board meetings sets that climate and helps create that culture. Being a learning organization, we expect our teachers to do professional development. We as board members should as well, and our ED, and having a support for reflection, success, discovery, all of these things where it's, we talk about lifelong learners. We should all be lifelong learners, and the organization is too, right? Like things change. And I mean, you talked about your population of students changing, and over time, we need to keep learning about who our students are and what they need. And then the last slide, systems thinking. So even in a small system, we're thinking about the whole system and not just siloed pieces of it that are connected. So, when we're doing systems thinking, we're not taking a problem here and putting it over here. We're thinking about, how does this thing impact the rest of the system? How does this strength, how can that be leveraged to benefit the rest of the system? And also, it's about seeking partnerships with other organizations. Anytime you can leverage anything and not reinvent the wheel, that's always a good thing. So having external relationships or relationships with the charter schools can be helpful. Innovation and creativity is fun. You get to think about, a question I often get is like, what's the board's role in that? Well, in 2020 and 2021, we all had to be super innovative and creative, right? We governed differently, we managed differently, we taught differently. Like, you made it through all of that by doing things differently and having to think differently. And so we know we can do that as boards, but looking at, okay, what is this issue? What have we not thought of? And working in collaboration with your executive director and her team, or however that shows up. But everybody on the board is a good thinker, and coming together as a team and having a work session about something specific can be a way to do that. The next one is your basic board roles and responsibilities. So your conduct, your ethics, your relationship with your executive director. That's knowing your role. Where does it end? Where does it begin? Where does it overlap sometimes with your executive director, but understanding and continuing to understand. It's important to have the kind of relationship with your executive director that she can say, hey board, you're overstepping a little bit on this. This is sort of my job, and vice versa. But that is a negotiation at times, because we as board members, we want to get involved, and sometimes it's, well, this is an administrative decision, and being able to talk about those things, and you having your opinions about that as well, but being able to talk. And then budgeting and financial accountability, being good stewards of the public funds that you have. And again, to the extent possible, aligning your strategic goals to your budget. And then knowing how your school is doing financially. I find that charter schools spend a lot more time on this than districts, because we can't just be closed. We can't just like, oh, well, everybody's quitting. I mean, it just doesn't happen the same way. Again, you are a 501c3 organization. I find that charter school board members really know how to read an audit, really know how to read a budget, and are more intimately involved in just monitoring, not, spending the money or whatever. But were there any of those that stood out to you as things you do really well? And I can flip back if you. In fact, let me flip back a couple. Look at this. Look at this page. Anything here that you feel like you're doing really well?
The accountability piece, they do really great.
I think the trend line on all of them tends to be in the right direction.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, is it? Interesting word.
Progressing.
Yes.
How about that?
There's always
Progressing.
Yep.
Anything that you specifically that you would want to work on? Anything stand out? Community engagement.
With, I think parents, in my opinion, understanding.
Yeah.
And what they can also be doing to help them with their avenues for communicating, right?
Yeah. What about on this slide? What is going well, or what is progressing?
We're doing more using data for continuous improvement.
I would say we can do a little bit better with learning, like not saying with an orange on. I think anything that comes into perspective that maybe a teacher would like to incorporate, or bringing in other expertise in, that each classroom will be having a struggle with or doing well with. Just learning from, I think, within the classroom setting is important. I think we do a really good job with cultural responsiveness and cultural climate. We're very aware of what our students need, and we do run into some difficulties, I would say, right? How to best support our kids. But I think that's kind of thinking outside the box, and parent community that have expertise with early child education, self and occupational therapy, anything that's related to school child development would be helpful to come into the classroom.
Yeah. What about here? Anything you feel like is progressing?
I think we're doing really well. Sorry. I think we're doing really well with our plans and looking for how to get the money that we need. I'm looking at you, sorry, in a positive of our art, of our music. Like, we have money now, and it's awesome. So I'm thankful for that. It's really cool.
Thank you. I also am worried about the budget. So
Right. I know. Yeah, but
There's never enough budget, for sure.
No.
And I have a specific budget question.
Great. Thank you. And if you are interested in like having these, I can always send them to you as well.
that would be great.
Yeah, I'll just send you my whole slide deck, because we will not get through all of it. We're not going to do that. Okay. I was asked to talk a little bit about officer roles. And so the first thing I always do is pull from your bylaws. So I had a copy of your bylaws, and this is what you say that you're going to do as far, these are your officer roles. And so this is not like, none of these are uncommon, right? Like your president, it says in your bylaws, supervises and controls affairs of corporation and activities of the officers. So that is not an uncommon, let me stop and say this first. I'm not an attorney. Nothing I say is legal advice. So that's not uncommon, but it sounds very micromanaging, right? Like this is a pretty common like thing in bylaws, but I think in the end, that just means if the buck has to stop somewhere, it stops. Obviously your president presides at all meetings of the board and then can execute contracts and other documents authorized by the board. So when you approve something like a contract, your president signs for it, generally. Is there anything else that you would say, okay, those are the bylaws, but this is sort of changed over time or isn't included in here?
Master functions is kind of the point of contact for community inquiry too. So if something's going on, y'all be the one who makes the phone call, the person to just chat and understand.
Right. And often the president or chair is like, you know, sort of the partner of the ED as well, and likely knows information that the rest of the board doesn't always know, and that's okay, right? Because there has to also be like decision-making filter. Does the board need to know everything that comes in? No, right? Like you trust your president to work with your ED to be like, these are things we're going to bring to the board or whatever, like how you set agendas like that. I don't know what your agenda setting process is, but like there has to be somebody who is sort of the hub of the wheel to the rest of the board. The vice president piece, all it says in your bylaws is that they act as the president. They don't have, yeah. Start
It's
of the
the
meeting.
best role, officer role there is.
Right, because he's done
Just a line under my name.
Yeah,
impressive.
exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So there are no in your bylaws president, which isn't necessarily always the case, but that is the case here, which is fine. Your secretary is supposed to keep the bylaws, be responsible for where those are, keep the minutes of board meetings and committee meetings, provide all of the notices of meetings, and it says be the general custodian of the records. That would mean
No.
that would
I
mean
need to
corporation
resign.
records, not student records, right?
Allowed to.
So knowing where those things are, ensuring their confidentiality, safety, etc. And then your treasurer says it's responsible for all the funds of the corporation deposit. They are to deposit, receive, and disperse funds, keep correct accounts and provide the books when requested, and prepare or cause to be prepared financial statements, including your audit. I was going to ask, is this a little bit different? Does your treasurer deposit, receive, and disperse funds?
No.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. So you may want to think about, like, depending on how long that's a practice, depending on how you want that to go, you may want to think about amending your bylaws, get an attorney to help you with that. But I wondered, I'm like, that's not necessarily super common. So anyway, just
Maybe
something to think
And
about.
we have a bookkeeper that
With the
keeps the account.
executive director
Yeah.
responsible for all funds.
Right. Yes, you could certainly add that. Or, you know, or staff, because if you've got a bookkeeper who's also on staff, I mean, like, you could add that.
Because Karen does, I mean, you transferred funds and moved money from bank to bank. So
Right.
you do have access to do that.
I
We
feel
still
like
ask
both
you
are
to
doing
do
that. I
The
think if we
names on the
said
accounts.
with
oops, she was
an
panicked.
accurate.
Did she? Well, okay, she caught it. That's good.
So those are your
Litmus
I got
test.
my nails slapped.
Those are your officer roles. Does
Glad
anybody
she saw
want to
it.
talk about any of that or have any questions about any of that? Is any of that surprising?
Sounds like Patrick should be emailing the agendas.
Quite possibly. Let's go ahead and go rogue and just make my own agendas.
There you go. Okay.
Sounds great.
The big thing is your understanding of the inability to resign from the role of secretary.
Agenda item number 1. New secretary search.
So, just to also bring to you, I looked at your policies, BBA and BBAA. This is, you know, board powers and duties, and then individual board members' authority and responsibilities. These are good ones to know, especially if you're onboarding new folks, because there always is that, what do we do as a whole board? What can I do as an individual? And there, it's not like, none of these are super surprising. I would say, one of them that I would point out in BBA, the board powers and duties, is act as a fact-finding body and court of appeals. So that is, I mean, those two things can go together, but it's important to understand, I think, what that means. Like, you are kind of, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. You are the last stop, not the first. The fact-finding body stuff does not mean that you are doing investigations all the time, right? So that's a little bit like, you want to make sure that you as a board define what that means and try not to get it too micromanaging. But when something gets to you that is appealed to you, like, you have the right to ask for information on how a decision was made if that decision is coming to you as a question.
And I think, and maybe it's in here, I haven't gotten to the bottom, but related to that, you guys learned earlier this year that if there is an official complaint, the investigator is a third party appointed someone else. Like, you guys aren't doing that.
You should definitely do it that way. Yeah. I have worked with boards where they're like, we designate this board member to go do the investigation. Do that.
There are people in the community who do this for a living, and so that's a better way for everybody, I think.
Absolutely.
And the rationale is because
any individual board member, we all have bias. That is going to be a person who's got more information than anybody else, and is like, then they have an unequal outsized role on the board. And again, like, you never know what's going to cause or what's going to be risky as far as liability. So if you are a board member doing an investigation and somebody doesn't like what you come up with, like, you just want to be able to say, we had a third party do this, it wasn't us. So as far as your individual roles and responsibilities, it's, you know, you only have authority when you're in legal session, unless, and that second one, you can act in the name of the board only when authorized by vote of the board. So if you've got expertise in something and you want to go do it, the board has to vote that you are assigned to that thing. Let's see. The legal advice one is interesting. So if you want to get legal advice on something, you're supposed to do it through a vote of the board, but the chair may do so independently. So your chair, that's what it says, it doesn't say president, has the power to go and get legal advice. Like, that designated as somebody who can.
Is that how we, the board members went directly to like the PACE attorney for advice? Would that be considered going
generally
to,
that's
or is that
free, right? Because you have PACE, so there's a lot of our advice that is just free.
Okay.
So I think, you know, this would be like if you had a general counsel through like Miller Nash or something, and you called them and racked up $1,000 or, you know, like whatever. But I think that, you know, we encourage folks to call PACE if they've got a question. Now, how you use that information should be to the benefit of all, right? And not, yes. Oh.
The back is bent on the book.
oh, thank you. Mosquito that.
It does say in this policy that you are supposed to direct complaints through the KL process. So that gives you some policy backing as well. Not only like, do we decide this is our rule, but our policy says that we have to do this as well. Nobody can direct the ED. The whole board does that. Okay. We're gonna skip scenarios because we don't have time. If I do at the end, does anybody have questions about public meeting law? Do you all know the new law that you have to take public meeting law training before the end of your term, once during your term?
no?
Okay, everybody has to do this now. So this is easy. So the Oregon Government Ethics Commission now has jurisdiction over public meeting law, in addition to what they already did, which was ethics and executive session. So back a while ago, well, before this bill was here, like if we're like making a decision outside of a board meeting, was kind of like come to a board meeting and talk about it, make the decision again, do it right. Now you can be sued for anything, right? Like anybody can sue you for violating public meeting law. The bill that passed says that the Oregon Government Ethics Commission now oversees and is the regulatory body for all public meeting law, and they can fine you individually. So just like they could with executive session, now you can be fined for violating public meeting law. So you also now have to get training in public meeting law once per term. So here's how you do it. It's easy. So you can either go through the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. I think they've got webinars, or an approved provider. We are, I think, the only approved provider right now. So we've got a webinar on the website. It's an hour and a half. You watch it, you have fulfilled your obligation.
And when you say term, what does term?
So like, do you have 2-year, 4-year terms?
We don't
We
have.
Open-ended.
You don't have terms.
No.
So I would just do that soon.
Soon.
But that would mean we just do it once.
You just do
Once
it
ever.
once.
Or
Yeah, 'cause
maybe
you
we
don't
just
have
have it be every couple of years and we just write that into one of our
Yeah, I
policies.
think, yeah, I think you do that, right? Just to be safe, like, yeah, we do this
Something
once every
changes.
And what
3
were the other
years.
things you said?
Ethics and executive session?
Mhm.
That sounds like an interesting topic.
That
So-
sounds like stuff we've never done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to have, well, I think executive session stuff is part of the public meeting law
yeah.
training. Ethics is not. You don't have to have training in ethics.
Okay,
So
I
it's
thought you
just-
said those were other things. we
No, it's
needed.
just what OGEC has
Okay.
regulatory powers over, and they
okay.
always have.
Okay, I
But
misunderstood.
now they-
I did
So-
too.
Yeah.
I popped on to OSBA's website. It looks like to sign up, we have to have an account.
Yeah,
Does that, should we all individually have an OSBA account?
yes, you should.
Okay.
So,
And yes, yes, we all
Of course you
do.
already did.
What's your
Nobody's-
login info?
nobody's watching you. I'm
Your
not a
Money Creek
regulatory
account.
agent. Like, that's not required. But you have access to a lot more stuff on our website if you have an account.
So it's super easy to sign up for said
It's
account.
super easy.
Okay.
It's just that the webinar is behind the login.
Right.
So once you have a login, you can get to the webinar. Ours is approved. Our attorneys did it. It's 90 minutes long. We do not track it for you. You have to track it. And if you're ever asked for evidence, what our attorneys at the end of the webinar suggest is that, like, I think they put a slide at the end of the webinar that was like, this is the date, this is the whatever, take a picture of it.
Okay.
I mean, you know, like a PDF you can download to show you the certificate. of it?
No, there's no certificate.
Or
Like, because we're not the regulatory body, we're not keeping track of that for folks. So, so we just suggest you take a picture, you file that away, and then, like, you know, whatever. So just keep that as your record.
So-
Yeah.
I'm just, it might be a good idea if when each of us does it, we take a picture, and then could we send that file?
Patrick, you, the secretary. Oh, that's a better idea. He's the document.
You can collect them as a school, but
They're adding
each
Jack is
individual-
really working hard to go
I
and become
didn't know, I
secretary.
was looking at Sarah to say we send it to,
Why don't we just take a picture and send it to the board email?
but I
And,
think
then
we
keep
want
it.
it.
and
To
keep it
Kristen's point,
yourself,
keep it
because
yourself.
each individual is responsible for recording.
Right,
their
I'm
own.
just, and it's probably because I'm old, but I'm thinking if we sent it here, could we have a paper copy that goes in
In
a
your binder.
folder yeah. Because I'll go, I have 5 million photos and where is this one?
Right.
And-
Yeah.
And so I think it would be nice to have something paper that's kept at the school.
Between the grandkids and the dog pictures.
Right, yeah.
Sounds good. Board email. And
So, yeah. So do that when you can. There's no test. It's just, have you had the training, right? Watch the webinar.
Watch it at double speed.
Exactly.
What part of public meeting law do people most commonly violate?
Committees are public bodies, if they are board committees. I think that is like, nobody knows that, right? And like if a committee is reporting to the board or making recommendations directly to the board, that committee has to follow public meeting law.
So if there's a committee that has to go and follow public meeting law, but the secretary is not part of it, what is typically the process for tracking minutes and all that? So
Somebody on that committee has to do it.
And now it would need to be videoed and posted, right?
Not yet. Well, so there is a bill out there to fix that, right? And I also don't think you have to post. You have to make it available live stream, but charter schools were not. I don't believe you were subject to the law that said you have to post. Yeah. But if you have, that's great, you know. And I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that charter schools were left out of that, and small districts were left out of that too. But everybody has to make it available virtually, right? Like anybody has to be able to attend your meetings, including committees that report to the board. I think the other one is accidentally creating quorums through emails and text. That's a huge one for us. That is really big. And it's important to remember that everything you send in your role as a board member, anything you put in writing through text, email, or whatever, is a public record. And it may not be disclosable. That's a matter for an attorney, but anything is subject to a public records request. So if somebody's like, I know you all talked about this, I want everybody's email on this subject, you get an attorney to help you figure out what can or can't be disclosed, but anybody can put in a public record request. And then there are rules around like how you have to respond to that and timing.
So I just sent out an email about the public meeting law trainings to everybody. No one has obviously responded yet. Do you like, is that
That's
public?
fine.
Okay.
Information.
Yeah, I mean, it's a public record, but don't respond. Don't talk about it. You haven't created a quorum, right? Like you're just being like, here's information about what we all need.
So responses create the quorum, not the initial email that goes out.
Right,
Okay.
right. It's
So
the
if somebody sends
following
an email
discussion.
to us, we can't respond, but we have to wait until we're all in quorum in a public meeting again to respond to it.
Well,
Right.
unless we designate Lester to
Yeah.
go ahead and respond.
Yeah.
He can respond. We
Yeah,
should.
he can respond. Right. Not everybody. I mean, so here's what you can do. If everybody gets an individual email, but it's the same one, you can respond to the person. Now we talked about like whether or not you should do this, right? But like what you could do is everybody responds to that person, right? Because that person is a community member and not part of the board, right? But what you should not do is email each other and talk about it at all, including what your response is going to be. Okay. That is why it's really important to have like one person on the board designated to answer.
And for my real life example right now, Sarah wrote us something. I did not respond, but I have a question, and it's a money question. So I feel like it's like a little more like important than waiting for 3 more weeks.
Yeah, just ask. You can ask her.
Oh, I can ask you directly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
she's
not
not.
don't have to
everybody
wait
else.
She's
till
not on the
we're
board.
all in quorum.
But don't CC or include
Yeah.
us.
Right.
Okay.
Don't copy the board, but you can have a conversation.
When I
I've been
respond,
trying to put that note on the bottom of my email, so
Mm-hmm.
just don't reply to each other, but if you have questions, reply.
Mhm.
when I respond to people, somebody does say they don't know anything, and they send the board, hey, I don't
Right.
like the color of the door.
Yeah.
I don't respond with everybody on that. I just write back to the person. I
Mhm.
assume everybody knows that I took care of that, but
Mhm.
anyway,
Mhm.
that's happening. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
If I found in the past that if I respond, then it starts to all of a sudden look like a dialogue, and then people chime in. So I just stop doing
Yeah.
that. I just go back to the person. and say,
Yeah.
"Hey."
Yeah. That's
Sometimes I'm like, well, nobody answered, so I did, and I'm, well, actually, I did.
right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, setting the expectation that the chair is always going to be the one to answer so that nobody feels like, well, I didn't get copied on anything, so maybe it didn't get answered. But if you've got that expectation and that trust in your president to answer it, you know, then you can let that happen.
I think that's even how our policy is worded.
Okay.
I think can sometimes get awkward as it feels like they wrote the board a pretty simple question that could be answered without,
Yeah.
the case about it,
Mhm.
Oh,
Well,
the
and-
door's red because we had red paint and that,
Right.
you know. But
And if somebody's got a question about like, Patrick, if you're like, I don't know if this got followed up on, you can always ask Lester, like, did you answer this? Whatever. That's okay. Okay. Skipping. I will point out in executive session, so these are the reasons you can enter executive session. The ones in red are relatively new. They're a couple years old, but I just want to point them out. So the first one is to consider matters relating to the safety of the governing body and of public body staff and volunteers and the security of public body facilities and meeting spaces. So you may remember a couple of years ago when board meetings all over the country got super contentious and a little bit dangerous in some places. This came after that. So you could meet an executive session to develop a plan for like, what are we going to do if there's a big safety concern? What do we do with our staff? What do we do with ourselves? Like, what do we do with our building? So you can talk about that. And then to consider matters relating to cybersecurity infrastructure and responses to cybersecurity threats. Obviously, that's not something you necessarily want to talk about in public, right? So you can go into executive session for that as well. If you've ever got any questions about, hey, we're about to talk about this, can we go into executive session? You can email me, but I'm going to send you to PACE because like telling you if a certain circumstance is applicable to executive session is legal advice. So you can always check with PACE on that. Let's see. I know I'm skipping a lot. I'm sorry. Okay. Just a couple of additional considerations that tend to be more impactful to charter schools is, knowing those board admin roles. And we've talked some about this today just because you are much closer. And so really ensuring that you are defining what is the board, what is your administrator role. Experience. It's a really good idea when you bring on new people that part of their onboarding is to learn what a charter school is, right? In my experience, a lot of folks who, and I don't know what the situation is here, but a lot of folks who have been on charter school boards or who've come onto charter school boards have been board members of nonprofit organizations. And while this is a nonprofit organization, as you know, it's so different, right? You're like a district board member and a nonprofit board member. And so if there's not experience in that way, which there's generally not, making sure that that your new folks are trained. And then also just looking for folks with a variety and diversity of experience in the world, right? In their lives to be on your board as well, to the extent that you can. Stability, board and staff, because there are no term limits or because board members can leave in quicker and different ways than district board members, although anybody can quit, but then it makes the news and stuff. Like having stability and a lot of churn on the board can be destabilizing. So, trying to maintain, and that also impacts culture of the school if you've got a lot of churn and if you've got a lot of churn in staff as well. So, just looking for, what kind of stability can we work toward and keeping that in mind. Transition planning, super important, right? Like, what if Sarah came to you and was just like, hey, I won the lottery, here's my 2 weeks, right? And so ensuring that there is a transition plan for key staff. Like, I always recommend this: write your own job description, because it's not what you got hired under, right? Like, the job that you do was not the job posting, right? And I would say also, like, the most important one of this is, I'm sure you have like school secretary or somebody like that. Like, that person always does like 7 things, right? and so writing down what the jobs are, including board member roles as well. So we went over what it says in your bylaws, but then like, what is the responsibility of the board for onboarding? Like, what is, like, how do you transition if you've been president for a long time? Like, what would you want the next person to know, kind of thing. And yeah,
Does OSBA have some like a webinar training of some kind that we can have new board members go through when they
Yeah.
when they come on?
we do. We've got a webinar for like, we've got a roles and responsibilities one, which is pretty basic. And I think there's one about new board members. There's definitely resources, like there's a tab that says like new board members, start
Yes,
here.
I found it.
Oh, you did. Good. Excellent.
Okay.
Do you have any founders on the board? No, right? Like, no,
We're
no,
like
no.
third
Okay.
to fifth
Yeah,
generation.
exactly. I'm like, that would be a long time on the board. I won't go over that. And then having sufficient bylaws and policies. I know you have both, right? But just ensuring that like you keep up on policies, that you do review your bylaws to ensure that like they are also reflective of your status as a public entity. Most bylaws that did I do a review of your bylaws at some point?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a
You
legal
weren't
review.
here.
What?
Karen may have been the only other one here. We did in the classroom over there, remember?
Mhm.
The very first one we did out. in
Mhm.
COVID.
Okay.
It was like 2 years after.
Yeah,
COVID.
yeah. Okay.
I know I missed
just
the first.
Which started a whole process of
Right.
looking at policies and.
That's good.
But-
That's great. Look where you are now. So the other thing that I wanted to just, introduce to you is there are lots of tools you can use for collaboration, not only with yourself, but with your ED as well. Having a good evaluation process for your executive director is super important, right? This is a collaborative, like it should be both accountability and support. And so having that evaluation process, like once you do an evaluation, the next cycle begins, right? You adopt your tool, process, and timeline so that everybody knows what to expect throughout the year.
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
So we tried something and then we backtracked on it
Mhm.
and tried a different way.
Mhm.
Once the board kind of tried to set the goals for the executive director, here's what we want to see the executive director do this year.
Mhm.
And then we backed off from that and allowed the executive director to kind of highlight
Mhm.
the goals that they wanted to do.
Mhm.
Like, what happens if the board does want, hey, we want to set a real goal here and it's ours and we want to hit it. And then what's the best practice? What works? I mean,
Sure. So what I always recommend is that second thing, like have your executive director like draft first her own goals, right? And bring them to you. And then you discuss those. If you say as a board, like, well, if you say like, these are great, like we accept it, then you adopt those and then, and do that right after your last evaluation. So that like there is a really clear expectation of what she's going to be working on this year. She's got time to do it and everybody knows how that's going to be evaluated. You could, again, hyperbole, Sarah comes to you with a goal like, I just want to paint all the walls at school and that's what I'm doing this year, right? I mean, the board could be like, no, we don't accept that. We're going to help you develop a goal. You can certainly do that. You have the right to direct your executive director, but the best practice is really like, have somebody have first shot at doing their own, and then you get to weigh in, right? And you get to collaborate on that. Doing a board self-assessment is a great, did we do that last year? We did do that last year. That's where we came up with goals. Yeah. That is a good thing to do on a regular basis to see where you grow, to see where you still need work. Having a board operating agreement, which I'm just going to show you an example of in just a moment, that can go along with your board executive director operating agreement. You can have 2 in 1. And then communication protocols. These are things like, I don't know if we did these last year. These are things like, if there is a crisis, how would you expect Sarah to connect with you? Because like, if Lester's saying like, I want an email, right? But Patrick is saying, well, I want to call. And Jamie's saying, well, I want to text. Like, you can't have that many expectations, right? So you need to like come together and like figure out what the expectations are for communication. So just to go over board operating agreement really quickly, because that got pointed out to me as maybe something that would be good to do. I'm going to show you an example of one, but it's good to like review it, to discuss it as a team, check it against your policies, And then you can also see if you've got a policy that suffices or if you need an agreement, and then determine the approach for addressing issues when they come up. So the board operating agreement is essentially like, here's a prioritized list of things that we all agree to that how we're going to operate. And if you combine that with a board director operating agreement, then the process that I recommend is, well, I'll show you. Let me just, now, why did that happen? Okay. So here's a sample of our, and you know, like you can edit, it's a PDF, but like of a board superintendent operating agreement. And it has a few things in it, like we agree to collaborative governance, we agree to communication. And then at the bottom, so the top parts are like the board operating agreement, right? Like, and of course you can change that. This is just a sample. Like we agree to all of these things about how we govern. We agree to all these things about how we communicate. Now, what are our top prioritized expectations of our director? And what are her top prioritized expectations of you? And all of this together creates, you know, a board operating agreement and a board director operating agreement. When I do this with boards, we have sort of a sample list of what are some common board expectations and what are some common like ED expectations. And what I do is like, you're not going to have 16. Nobody's allowed 16 because that's too many. But I would like hand this out to you and say, you know, you as an individual are going to pick 5. And then you're going to get into groups. You're going to narrow that down to 5. And then as a whole team, we're narrowing it down to 5, right? And then Sarah just gets to pick her 5 without narrowing down. And so like you come up with these prioritized lists, and then you get to use that document, right? Like the conversation is really important, but you also get to use the document if you need to be accountable to yourselves or others.
How often do you recommend reviewing this?
Every year. And then I recommend using it. Like a lot of boards will like keep it at their like board table just to, you know, if we need to remind ourselves and each other that like we're out of agreement, like that's okay to do. And it's also a nice like way to be accountable to the public as well. Like we're holding ourselves accountable.
I've seen some of the operating agreements just in looking around at other people's board stuff, and it just seems like a great like intention setting exercise and almost like setting meeting norms in a way. And I think with
Now,
the new composition of a board, it might really be helpful.
Yeah. The other option is if you have policy BBF, it is, which you probably do, but it's an optional policy. You do. It is like a board operating agreement because it's got all these standards that you're going to hold yourselves to. You could look at that and say, is that sufficient for us? But that also doesn't have anything to do with your ED. So that is it. I will send you my slides so that you can see the other things. In our last 5 minutes, is there anything that you want to talk about or need from me? Do we get it all talked out?
Process.
Yeah, it's a lot. Okay.
Well, I think that was great and a great introduction for Alex and a refresher for the rest of us.
Yeah. Good. Good. I'm glad we like really dove in and talked about something that you wanted to talk about. I think that was super important. So thank you for engaging in that way and saying, you know, this is what we need because that's what's most important.
Alex, this is just the beginning of when you repeatedly ask yourself, what did I sign up for? This is not what I thought it
Why am I
was.
here?
Well, I was telling Patrick, I wish I had a little more training before coming into the process, but I'm getting it pretty early. It sounds like, because I guess Patrick was on the board for like a year before he did.
Oh, I had no clue for probably 2 years.
It was 3 years before it was COVID, so there was nothing that really happened. So anyway, I think the first time we did this, Karen, you were probably there, and I think you missed the first one.
I did. I was at work.
But like we were pretty much exposed to being like way off the rails here in a number of ways, and it feels like as you go, okay, you know,
That's an improvement for
we've
sure.
got a competent ED who's helping us guide through it here, and I feel like the board is terrific right now relative to, you know, her engaged and kind of know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we have policies that actually fit what we're
That's great.
going to do. Our compliance with the legal requirements and things. So anyway, yeah.
Just I was wondering if, when they all sign up for their OSBA accounts for their webinar, is there something like a newsletter or something that you would recommend that they sign up for too, or?
Yeah, we've got we've got a number of things. We have a daily like clips thing that goes out where somebody in our communication department literally scans like every paper in the state and sends out like links to stories and divides it by like Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, Central Oregon, and stories as well, or statewide stories like from OPB or Oregonian or whatever. And so those can be interesting and super informative sometimes, especially as we're all trying to keep up with federal changes and or impacts to other states, frankly. And so that's an interesting one. We also have, I think, a monthly newsletter that goes out that also like summarizes what each department is doing. But if you're looking for, and then there's just a ton of stuff on the website, right? Like there's just a ton of information on the website. But the daily news clips is interesting because you can see everything everywhere. I mean, we all as staff read it every day. And I'm trying to think, then our monthly one, that is more internal, not internal to OSBA, but more about like, here's what we're doing, in every department in case you're interested. And I'm trying to think if there's any other. There is a board chair cafe thing that happens that my colleague Vince Adams leads. He was do any of you know him? Yeah. He was on the Corvallis School Board for 10 years. Yeah. Vince, yeah. In fact, I told him I was coming out here today. He's like, oh, that's great. So he's on my team and he runs, because he's been a board chair, he runs like there's a listserv for board chairs that has stuff that he writes or that other folks write, and that you can also like collaborate with or ask other leaders what's going on, and then he has like monthly webinars that are for leadership. Now anybody can go to those, but like it's tailored for board leadership. I'm trying to think. Those are kind of our big main outreach. Need anything from me? I'm your long-term support person. So, long-term support person. I've been with you for years. I always appreciate
And always very
seeing all of you.
helpful too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good. Thank you. That is my goal. Super happy to be working with you again. If you need anything from me, I am an email away or phone call.
Can you send an email out to us so we have your contact information, the appropriate contact information? For each of you?
Yeah, I can do that. When I send you my slides, you'll have it. Yep. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out on Saturday.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for the. Thanks, Jackie. Anybody else who-
I know.
I didn't do the
Alex,
snacks.
Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.
And you should probably officially, do you have more business?
Yeah.
Can I ask one question?
No.
Yeah, you can ask questions.
We
We're
got an
Still
email.
streaming.
Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna use anybody's name. We got an email that we might have another staff member for a little while for the end of the year. And I'm just wondering how much more money that's gonna be on the budget because we're, budget.
I believe it's $135 today. No, that's not right.
And it's
$235.
now for till the end. So like
No,
another,
starting June, whatever, the first school day in June.
okay, so 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay. And we have enough for them.
It's a benefit
all
that we don't
relative.
usually get. So usually we don't have any kind of overlap of staffing.
Yeah.
And so the person who is outgoing now has an opportunity to train the person who is incoming.
Especially
And that's an
like
opportunity I'm gonna take. And I don't.
kind of a
yeah.
unique job. It's not. Yeah. Those are harder to train than for a teacher.
And even though the incoming staff member has been here as a sub, they did not experience the breadth of the job, and there was no overlap because that person was not here. So to me, it's something that I jumped on because we don't usually get that option, and I think it's well worth the money.
All right, let's adjourn. Any other questions? Good. Yeah. Okay, let's adjourn. 12:03. 2.
Are you gonna have to go